Chapter 142. The box was the size of a fingernail. Inside it was the powder of the herbs that had been purified and ground. It was also mixed with other strong spices that could invigorate blood circulation. It would make one's mouth dry, skin warm up, and hallucinate. It was the same effect as the legendary aphrodisiac. Even though the technology in this era was not that great, the products that were related to reproduction were quite well developed. She wiped off the powder with a handkerchief and closed the box. That's all? The old housekeeper saw that she looked normal and her eyes were clear. He could not help but sigh in relief. Remembering the servant's reply, he blushed. Of course there's more. There are other, ridiculous things. But I didn't want to dirty your eyes and ears, and I didn't want to alert the enemy, so I didn't take those things out. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. She could guess what the old housekeeper was talking about. It was probably a little tool for he. She had been single for years and didn't know anything. You should talk to my father about this. He should know what to do. That Meng Liang is not a good person. Who knows what kind of good intentions he has for bringing these things into the Lu manor. Jiang Pengji said as she put the box into her purse. The old housekeeper wanted to take the box, but he froze halfway. Since Meng Liang was the second lady's son and entered the manor as the second lady's niece, it was logical for him to eat with the second lady in the name of filial piety. Looking at the mature woman sitting at the head of the table, he suddenly felt his mouth go dry. She was his father's first wife, and she was also his birth mother, in name. The two taboos made him excited. Just thinking about it made him want to make a move. However, this was the Lu residence, so he didn't dare to do anything in public. Compared to forcing things, he preferred to give in. It was more interesting that way. He could not help but smile when he thought about how the mistress of the Lu manor had become his woman without anyone knowing. The second lady sat at the head of the table and looked at her wife coldly. She felt sick inside. What are you thinking about? Why are you so happy? She put down her chopsticks. Seeing such a disgusting person, it would be strange if her appetite was good. Meng Liang immediately came back to his senses and put away the thoughts in his heart. He said respectfully, when I was in the Meng mansion, I always wanted to reunite with you. I looked forward to it day and night. I didn't expect that my dream would come true. I can't contain my joy. I've made a fool of myself in front of you, mother. TSK, this mouth of his was as glib as his father. Unfortunately, who didn't know what color his stomach was? The second madam was disgusted, but she maintained a neutral attitude on the surface. It must have been hard on you. Mother's body is at peace now. No matter how much pain I suffer, I won't feel bitter. It's all worth it. If it were a normal mother and son, the mother would feel relieved even if she was not moved when hearing such words. However, when she thought of the child she had painstakingly given birth to, the son with a cinnabar mole between his eyebrows was replaced by the son of a concubine and enjoyed the generous treatment of the legitimate son of the Meng family. Her son was killed by that B*TCH alone and did not even have a name after his death. Every time she thought of this, the second madam felt a flame of hatred burning in her heart, forcing her to the brink of collapse. When she was in a bad mood, the second madam found an excuse to send Meng Liang out. He still wore the mask of a filial son, so he naturally did not dare to disobey. However, Meng Liang did not dare to get angry at the second madam, but couldn't he vent his anger on the manservant beside him? The manservant was loved by Meng Liang and was still living a comfortable life. Naturally, he had a way to appease Meng Liang. It's my honor to scold and hit you, Lang Jun. The servant's face was slapped a few times, and both sides of his cheeks quickly became red and swollen. His skin was thin and fair, so the two palm marks were very obvious. However, if others saw it and misunderstood Lang Jun, wouldn't it be your servant's fault? Please calm down. When we enter the room, you can scold me however you want. Be careful that your hand hurts. Meng Liang was so angry that he snorted heavily. He entered the room, sat down, and gulped down 2 cups of tea. The manservant knew Meng Liang very well. Once he showed such an attitude, he must have been humiliated by someone. Humph, what a cold-hearted woman. No wonder father hated her to the core. Meng Liang thought of the second madam's perfunctory attitude. He could not help but feel angry. He had not even been this filial to his own mother, but that woman was still so pretentious. She had even sent him out hastily just now. It was such a disgrace. The manservant rolled his eyes and said, Lang Jun, don't be angry. You were raised by master, so it's normal for her to not be close to you. Then what else can I do? She's always guarded against me. She doesn't even drink the porridge I sent her, and she doesn't let me get close to her. The manservant thought about it and said, in my opinion, Lang Jun can be a little more indirect. She fell out of favor not long after she gave birth to her son. Later, she remarried Lu Zhongqing. She cares about Lu Zhongqing's second legitimate son, so it's not like she didn't fall in love with him. It's obvious that she still cares about her son. How about this, Lang Jun, get closer to Lu Lang Jun and be on good terms with him. That way, Madam's attitude will naturally soften. Meng Liang raised his head and looked at the manservant suspiciously. You stupid advisor, do you think this suggestion will work? The manservant let out a sigh of relief. Lang Jun, why don't you give it a try and you'll know. If this doesn't work, it won't be too late for you to settle the score with me. You're that madam's biological son. No matter how cold she looks, she's still on your side. What's more, Lu Langjun is the legitimate son of Lu Zhongqing's first wife. If that madam gives birth to a legitimate son in the future, wouldn't her child be inferior to Lu Langjun? Seeing that Meng Liang's expression had softened a little, he fanned the flames again. In other words, don't think that madam treats Lu Langjun so well. She doesn't even know how much she hates him. No matter how distant you are from her, you're still biological mother and son. Meng Liang thought about it and felt that it made sense. Let's give it a try for now. If it doesn't work, then it's a bad idea. Be careful of your skin and flesh. The manservant smiled and flattered, but he was secretly relieved. He thought that he had diverted the trouble to Jiang Pengji, but he had no idea that he had fallen into Jiang Pengji's trap. She had already dug a few holes for Meng Liang to jump into. She would definitely squeeze out every last bit of value from him and let him die a quiet death. That night, 2 or 3 people quietly sneaked into the farm. Chapter 143. Among them, the most well-built man raised his hand to wipe the sweat off his face. His black and white eyes seemed especially resolute and spirited in the dark. There were still a few unhealed wounds on his face, and congealed blood stained his face. He looked like an Azura in the dark night. It seems that the owner of the farm isn't an ordinary person. These were left for us on purpose, our whereabouts have been exposed. Then, what should we do now, Captain? They were extremely disgusted with thieves, but they were at their wits' end now. If they didn't do this, the brothers who had escaped with them would either die of illness or from a relapse of their injuries. They had no choice but to do this. They were also very careful, and each household only took a small amount for emergencies. Logically speaking, it shouldn't arouse suspicion in a short period of time. Just keep it. What else can we do? The man called Captain bent over and picked up the wrapped items. If the owner of the farm had any ill intentions, he would have been waiting for us with the bailiffs. Why would he be so quiet? What about these? The man's companions were slightly hesitant. The captain said, it's probably because the owner is kind. Seeing that we didn't steal everything and only took some, he probably guessed that we weren't in a good situation, so he secretly helped us. Take the items away and remember this kindness in our hearts. We'll find a way to repay him in the future. The captain couldn't be blamed for thinking this way. They had been to many farms, and this was the richest one. It was also the one with the most food. The few tenant farmers in this farm didn't live a good life, but they had enough to eat and wear. They even had a lot of surplus and could save up money. He had seen many tenant farmers who worked for the farm before. They were all skin and bones, and they worked so hard that their hands and feet cracked. The squires exploited them, and the imperial court imposed various exorbitant taxes on them. They didn't even have enough to eat a full meal, let alone save up money. Just by comparing the two, he could guess that even if the owner of this farm wasn't a good person, he wasn't evil either. The captain seemed to have a lot of prestige among them. After hearing his words, the others immediately felt relieved. When they took the big bag back and opened it, they found that the owner of the farm was better than they had imagined. Not only were there warm clothes to resist the night wind, bedding, life-saving medicinal herbs, and clean white cloth, there were even 2 portions of streaky pork wrapped in lotus leaves, weighing at least 5 caddies. Next to it were some small pieces of bones, which were the best for making soup. Apart from these bits and pieces of food, there were even a few earthenware bowls and chopsticks, a medicinal stove, and more than 2 buckets of rice. These things didn't look precious, but they were extremely meticulous. One of them had sharp eyes and even took out half a tael of silver from the folded bedding. Normally, any one of them would be able to afford these things. However, their lives had fallen to the lowest point, and they could only endure hunger and the torment of illness. It was said that it was easy to add flowers to a brocade, but difficult to provide charcoal in a snowy day. At this moment, he deeply understood the meaning of this saying. For a moment, even those who didn't like to cry the most had their eyes turn red. Why are all of you so hesitant? Go stew the meat, boil the bones into soup, and decoct the medicinal herbs. Don't delay. The captain, who Meng Liang called Meng Hun, was the first to recover from his gloomy mood. He passed the new bedding to the injured brothers. Although the cave they were hiding in was secluded, it was very cold and damp, and the ground was wet with puddles of water. They had no choice but to cover the ground with a layer of dry branches and haystacks. However, such a simple and crude environment was extremely unfavorable for healing. Now that they had good medicinal herbs, white cloth to change wounds, and warm bedding, it was like a dream. At least, the brothers in the cave had a chance to live. He didn't want to wake up the next day to find the corpses of his former brothers dead. Although there were no seasonings, the taste of the fresh, top-notch pork was still very good after being casually stewed in water. Then, he drank some soup made from the bones and accompanied it with the sticky rice porridge. A warm current flowed through his limbs, instantly giving him the illusion that he had returned to the human world from hell. Meng Hun's originally anxious heart gradually calmed down. Although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was in turmoil. He was afraid that these things had been tampered with. However, after checking, he found that there was nothing wrong with these things, and he couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. He was the one who had misunderstood the owner of the farm by gauging the heart of a gentleman with his own mean measure. "County Commandant, do you want to send someone to ask about that family tomorrow?" Since he had received their kindness, he naturally had to return it. Not to mention, this was a life-saving favor. Meng Hun gulped down the hot rice porridge and gritted his teeth. "Of course we have to ask. I, Meng Hun, haven't learned many words, but I know that a drop of water should be repaid with a spring of water. Today, he saved my brother. In the future, when I get my revenge, my life is his." Although he said so, his current identity could not be exposed. If he really had a relationship with that kind family, it would be easy to implicate them. This was not repaying kindness, but harming people. Meng Hun's name was Hun, but he was not. Speaking of revenge, one of them gritted his teeth. "That bastard is very cunning. I don't know where he is hiding now. Meng Hun said without batting an eyelid, "A dog can't stop eating sh*t. That bastard is still a bastard even if he is in a different place. Hejian County is a place that people from Zhangzhou have to pass on their way to Shangjing. Although it is a small place, it is a good place to raise beauties. That bastard hates being restrained by the elders in his family. Now that he is out of Meng County, Zhangzhou, there is no one around to restrain him. How can he give up the opportunity to hunt for beauties? As long as he stood guard here, he would definitely be able to catch that bastard." Actually, he and his brothers had been investigating for the past 2 days and had indeed found some useful information. Based on the evidence, it was highly possible that Meng Liang was already in Hejian County. Thinking of his wife and daughter who had died tragically, Meng Hun clenched his fists in anger. Blue veins popped out on his forehead. He wanted to tear Meng Liang alive with his bare hands. He was a retainer of the Mengs. He was destined to go through fire and water and serve the Mengs. There were hundreds of scars on his body. Which one of them was not caused by the Mengs? He had been on the brink of death several times, and which one was not because of the Mengs? He was not smart, and he did not know many words. He learned everything slowly, but he knew that he had to be grateful. He could not be two-faced and treacherous. Meng Hun was grateful for the care of the Mengs for his family. He wished he could give his heart to the Mengs in return. He was willing to be a pawn of the Mengs in this life, and he would do the same in the next life. But his loyalty was exchanged for the death of his wife and daughter. Chapter 144. The Internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Meng Hun felt like his insides were burning when he thought of the despair his wife and daughter went through before they died. His eyes were bloodshot and his eyes were bloodshot. His anger was burning and gradually infected the others. The delicious hot soup in their mouths was tasteless. "Captain, we'll have plenty of chances to get our revenge. The next time we see that bastard, Meng Liang, we'll cut him down as a sacrifice to our sister-in-law and niece's souls in heaven." The man raised his left hand and patted Meng Hun's shoulder. His right hand was injured. He had just cleaned the wound with clean water, applied medicine, and hung a white cloth around his neck. It was not convenient for him to move. "Yeah, my sister-in-law and niece are watching from the heavens. They will definitely bless us to kill that little bastard Meng Liang. Good people deserve good things," another man said in a low voice. He was clumsy and said whatever was on his mind. He was not good at comforting people. Meng Hun was woken up by the force on his shoulder. His face was still gloomy, but he did not continue to indulge in hatred. Seeing Meng Hun's reaction, the others could not help but feel worried. The person who had led them through life and death was this burly, 7-foot-tall man in front of them. The person who had stepped forward to save their lives in times of crisis was also this person. Even though he himself was living a hard life, he still took care of them from time to time. On the contrary, what did the Mengs do? Part of their glory and wealth was due to their ancestors, and the other part was the blood, sweat, and flesh of ordinary people. Therefore, when Meng Hun suppressed his emotions and said, "I want to rebel," they did not hesitate to follow him and rebel against the Mengs. Compared to the Mengs who relied on their ancestors, they trusted Meng Hun more. "Good people deserve good things?" Meng Hun murmured. He looked as if he had lost his soul. He buried his face in his palms. If good people were really rewarded, then how could his virtuous wife and quick-witted daughter end up like that? In the hidden cave, the men looked at each other in silence. They all had their own thoughts and tacitly did not disturb Meng Hun. The farm was shrouded in the moonlight and was silent. Nowadays, Su Ku could be considered as a trusted subordinate of the head of the family. He could be considered as the head of the farm. At night, he could light an oil lamp and use the light to organize the training records during the day as well as the various expenses of the farm. If he had enough time, he could even read some classics and history books. Today, after he was done with the accounts, he did not take out his book. Instead, he took off his cloak and draped it over his shoulders. He picked up the oil lamp on the table. Creak, raising his hand to block the wind from blowing out the oil lamp, he made his way to the cubicle next to the kitchen where the ingredients were stored. He lifted the lamp and took a closer look. Sure enough, the things he had prepared were gone. Even the footprints on the ground had been deliberately erased. The gift is light, but the sentiment is heavy. It's good that this gift can be delivered to the bottom of my heart. Su Ku looked around the cubicle, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Then, he looked a little worried. Tisk, although that's the case, I've spent 6 taels and 7 xian this time. He had used up more than half of it. If he had known earlier, he would have asked for more from Lang Jun. Su Ku frowned. He guarded the oil lamp, closed the cubicle door, and walked back to his room step by step. These days, ordinary people could only taste meat once a year on New Year's Day. The 2 bags of pork belly were expensive. Moreover, he had specially gone to the pharmacy to pick out the medicinal herbs and white cloth. The medicine was effective, but it was also expensive. Those brand new bedding, warm clothes, pottery utensils, and so on, all added up to 6 taels and 7 copper coins. He only hoped that he would not make a mistake this time. If he ended up with a one-way ticket. He felt that it would be hard to appease his Lang Jun, who loved to make trouble. When that time came, he would be the one to face her anger. Su Ku closed the door, blocking out the cold outside. Su Ku moved the charcoal basin slightly closer to himself. The coldness in his body suddenly lessened, and his stiff and cold hands and feet slowly warmed up. Let's see how those people react tomorrow. We'll know then. Su Ku muttered. He used the oil lamp to read a bamboo scroll that he had borrowed from Jiang Pengji's study. Sometimes he frowned, and sometimes he had a sudden realization. He was so immersed in it that he forgot himself. The next morning, the gatekeeper of the Luz yawned as he walked out of the corner gate. Coincidentally, a simple and low-key carriage came from the entrance of the alley. The horse stopped, and the carriage stopped right in front of the Luz door. The gatekeeper rubbed his sleepy eyes and stared at the patterns on the carriage. The corresponding family immediately appeared in his mind. Wasn't that the carriage of the second Langjuan's teacher, Wei Gongchao? Wei Gongchao was so dedicated. He came to teach Lang Jun as soon as he recovered. The gatekeeper thought to himself. He asked someone to invite the housekeeper over while he went forward to welcome the guest. However, the person who came out of the carriage was not Wei Gongchao. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. The man was tall and wore a new scholarly robe. He had a cloak over his head, and his black hair was tied up neatly with a crown. Judging by his clothes, he should be a scholar. His height alone gave people a natural sense of oppression, not to mention the aura around him. His face was deeper than most people's. He didn't look like someone from the Central Plains, but more like someone from the northern borderline. The young man stepped on the stool and opened the curtain. The person who came out was Wei Gongchao, the teacher of the Luz. Mr. Gongchao, we have arrived at the Luz. Qiguan Rang still maintained his cold expression. Perhaps it was because of the light in the day, but the coldness in his eyes was not as strong as it was at night. Wei Gongchao looked up at the sky and then at the Luz closed door. Only the corner door was slightly open. The servants saw Wei Yuan and thought that he was there to teach Lang Jun. Who would have thought that he was there to resign? Lu Shi's sleepiness disappeared when he heard the reason for Wei Yuan's visit. He looked serious. But my son is naughty. How did he offend you? Even though he had tacitly agreed to let Jiang Pengji study in Langyi, he did not expect Wei Yuan to come to him to resign. He thought about it and his heart skipped a beat. He was afraid that Jiang Pengji had said something to Wei Yuan in private. Offending someone was secondary. More importantly, Wei Yuan's status and reputation among the Dongqing scholars was not low. If there was no reasonable explanation for the matter, based on the current situation, his daughter was not in the right. A teacher for a day, a father for life. Being a teacher was also a form of filial piety. Wei Yuan smiled. Zhongqing, you don't have to be like this. This is the result of my careful consideration. It's not that Lanting is bad. Qiguan rank status and age were not high enough to interrupt their conversation. He simply sat behind Wei Yuan and acted as a backdrop. Qiguan Rang was also surprised that Wei Yuan had brought him to the Luz. He knew that Wei Yuan saw him as his future son-in-law, but it was beyond his expectations that he would be treated so well. Chapter 145. Lu Shi had already noticed the young man behind Wei Yuan. His heart was as clear as a mirror. Wei Yuan didn't bring the unfamiliar young man over to visit his relatives or simply to go through the motions. He most likely wanted to act as a middleman to introduce them to the young man. However, the topic was about resignation. It had nothing to do with the young man. Wei Yuan laughed bitterly and laughed at himself. Lu Zhongqing, do you really have to tear me apart before you're happy? Lanting isn't bad, but you know my temperament. You also know Lanting's temperament. If I continue to teach her, won't I mislead her? You won't be able to get even with me in the future. It's better for me to resign now. But... Lu Shi hesitated. Lanting studies, we've been teacher and student for a few years. I hope that one day, Lanting can be famous. As Wei Yuan spoke, he took out a letter of recommendation that he had written earlier from his sleeve. Lu Shi looked suspicious. He took the letter and was shocked. How can Lanting become Master Yuanjing's student with that little ability of hers? Wei Yuan shook his head. It's not that Lanting has to be Master Yuanjing's student. After all, that person has a strange temperament. You and I have heard about him. Lanting might not be able to like him. It's just that there are many talented people in Langyi County. There are as many scholars as there are stars in the sky. It's easy to make friends. At Lanting's age, she should learn to go out and visit friends. She shouldn't be cooped up at home. Although it was good to have a talented teacher at home for one-on-one instruction, there were many drawbacks. Wei Yuan always felt that his student's temperament was too introverted and shy. She didn't have any good friends or playmates of the same age. She stayed at home all day and refused to move. He didn't know that there was a special term for people like her who didn't go out all year round. If she continued to stay at home, she would definitely grow mold and mushrooms would grow. It would be great if Lu Shi could make a trip to Langyi. It would be best if he could become a disciple of the Master of the Abyss. If there was no other way, Lu Shi could study in Langyi Academy and make more friends. This would be very helpful for his future career. The officialdom was not a place that could be explored alone. If Lu Shi was just an ordinary aristocrat, as his son, Lu Shi would only need to be slightly more successful than him. However, the reality was that Lu Shi was famous in Dongqing and even the 5 countries. He had made countless enemies in the officialdom. This was a bit embarrassing. Lu Shi's political enemies couldn't do anything to his father, but couldn't they do something to his son? Even a fool knew that one had to pick the softest persimmon. In the future, Lu Shi would only be obsessed with literature. It would be fine if he did not get involved in politics, but once he did, he would immediately have a row of natural political enemies. In order to have an easier road in the future, it was important to start building connections now. How could Lu Shi not understand that Wei Yuan was thinking about Jiang Pengji? Even if Wei Yuan hadn't come to ask for his resignation, he would have waited for Wei Yuan's condition to improve before taking the initiative to visit him. Now that Wei Yuan had taken the initiative to step forward, it saved them a lot of unnecessary trouble. Lu Shi naturally wanted to return the favor. My stubborn son has troubled you, Brother Gongchao, Lu Shi said with a sigh. He carefully accepted Wei Yuan's recommendation letter. We haven't seen each other for many years. I wonder if Brother Gongchao would be willing to stay for lunch and drink with me? Wei Yuan and Lu Shi weren't that close in the past. They weren't close friends, but they were closer than ordinary friends. Since you've asked, how can I refuse? Wei Yuan stroked his beard with a satisfied smile. Lu Shi's reaction was within his expectations. Lu Shi was about to get up and order some food and wine. It was only then that he noticed the young man next to Wei Yuan. He looked a little surprised and teased, "Are you a descendant of Brother Gongcao's family?" Qiguan Rang had been looking down respectfully. When he heard Lu Shi mention him, he cupped his hands and bowed. Wei Yuan stroked his beard and smiled. "I'm not a descendant of my family, but I'm close." Lu Shi's heart skipped a beat. He knew that this was probably Wei Yuan's son-in-law candidate. His interest was piqued and he carefully examined the young man. To judge a person, one didn't just have to look at their appearance. More importantly, one had to look at their spirit. It could be said to be their temperament or their aura. Some people could wear mulberry linen with a leather brocade. Others, even if they wore gold and jade, looked like beggars on the side of the road. After a closer look, Lu Shi exclaimed, "I don't know where Brother Gongchao found him. He's an outstanding young man." Wei Yuan's cheeks were flushed with joy when Lu Shi praised his son-in-law. He was proud of himself. Qiguan Rang didn't say anything. He just clenched his fists in his sleeves. Even if he could calmly plot to kill someone, how could he stay calm in front of the only person in Dongqing he had approved of, an idol? Wei Yuan smiled and waved his hand, saying that Lu Shi was praising him too much. "How should I address you?" Lu Shi didn't put on airs. Instead, he seemed very approachable. The question was directed at Qiguan Rang. It wasn't convenient for Wei Yuan to answer. He brought Qiguan Rang here to let him have a look at Lu Shi. He couldn't help him with everything. "I'm Qiguan Rang. Greetings, Chief Lu." Lu Shi was silent for a while. Then, he asked with a smile, "Where do you live? Where are you from?" "Shangyu from the northern borderline," Qiguan Rang answered. Lu Shi looked down. His expression became more serious. His voice became softer. "Do you have a courtesy name?" "My master has taken it." "Courtesy name Wenzheng." Lu Shi was speechless. Right now, he really wanted to be alone. Don't ask him who Jing Jing was. Qiguan Rang, courtesy name Wenzheng, from the northern borderline. He lost his wife at a young age, that was what he knew. There was nothing special about him. What was special was that he was unusually ruthless and cunning. A few years later, in order to help his master make up her mind to rebel against Dongqing, he burned down Shangyang Palace and killed all the men in the royal family of Dongqing. Of course, that wasn't the point. The point was that he was one of the few people who had defeated Emperor Chen, Lu Shi. 3 cities were lost in a row. It wasn't because the latter didn't have enough troops. It was because Qiguan Rang was too cunning and cunning. If that was the case, Lu Shi wouldn't have wanted to be alone. According to Ah Min, although this person was talented, the lord he served was indecisive. People said that he was soft and did not have a mind of his own. In the end, another strategist took advantage of the situation and caused Qiguan Rang to lose his trust. Instead, he was put under house arrest and abandoned. What was the result? Qiguan Rang set up a trap in the prison and put his master in a hopeless situation. On the day the city was conquered, he personally opened the gate to welcome the new master. Chapter 146. We provide you with exciting novels to read. Logically speaking, a man who was disloyal, job-hopping, and cheated his former boss would be despised by everyone. However, Qiguan Rang was not despised by his new boss, the Emperor Chen. Instead, he was put in an important position and was promoted to be the emperor's confidant. Min had once said that Qiguan Rang was a controversial person in both official and unofficial history. In Emperor Chen's think tank, he was not a very popular person. He did not have a good relationship with others, but he had been able to rise through the ranks. This was inextricably linked to Emperor Chen's constant protection. Lu Shi carefully observed Qiguan Rang, trying to find a trace of something on his face. What trace? It was a mystery that Min had been thinking about before her death. The Emperor Chen's throne had always been empty and the harem was empty. There was no trace of a male partner in the official history. However, he had a daughter and a strange man's body was buried in the imperial mausoleum. So here came the question. Who was Jiang Gaozong's father? According to Min's chatter, it seemed that the later generations had guessed the men around the emperor. There were all kinds of sadomasochism, and each had their own reasons for being on the list. The reason why Qiguan Rang was in the top 10 was because of the emperor's protection and trust in him. This was a privilege that many people did not enjoy. It should be known that Qiguan Rang had done many things. According to the customs of the time, it was not an exaggeration to say that Qiguan Rang would have died 100 times over. If he was disloyal once, he wouldn't die 100 times. How many people thought that Qiguan Rang's loyalty was almost non-existent and that he would stab the emperor in the back? But the emperor's words made everyone shut up. It was even written into the official history and could be verified. In this big world, who can be called a wise ruler other than me? Qiguan Rang had said, a virtuous minister chooses his master. The emperor had said that she was the only wise ruler in the world. In other words, who else would Qiguan Rang be loyal to besides her? Who else could he be loyal to? Lu Shi thought about it a few times, but there was no change in his expression. Instead, he said naturally, Wen Zheng. That's a good name. Good, my ass. Proof, admonition, from the words, the voice. However, if one were to look at Qiguan Rang's future life, only the love and hate entanglement described by Min, would the things he did be worthy of this cousin's name? Qiguan Rang did not know that Lu Shi's heart had completely let go of himself. His mind was full of rich and colorful thoughts, which made people speechless. You don't have to be so restrained. Since brother Gongchao and I are of the same generation, you are also considered to be my junior. Lu Shi changed the topic and said, Lanting told me before that brother Gongcao's family has an extraordinary young man. I think he must be Wen Zheng. His words were full of affirmation for Qiguan Rang. Although his idol was so approachable, Qiguan Rang faintly felt that something was wrong. He thought that he was a little untalented, but Lu Shi did not test him, nor did he try to test him. Instead, he was so sure of himself. His words did not seem to be fake, but very sincere. It seemed that he really knew something and had seen through him from the beginning. Before Qiguan Rang could think further, Lu Shi called the housekeeper over and asked what Jiang Pengji was doing. Wei Yuan was satisfied and took the initiative to say, I still have some things to discuss with Zhongqing. Wen Zheng, go and see Lanting for me. As for what they were going to discuss, only he and Lu Shi knew. Dongqing was on the verge of collapse, but there were still people living in a drunken stupor. Wei Yuan was anxious and had no choice but to come to Lu Shi to find out what was going on. He also wanted to find out more about Lu Shi's relationship with the Mengs in Tsang Prefecture's Meng County. Have you seen my father? Qiguan Rang was led to Jiang Pengji's study by the housekeeper. As soon as he entered, he saw Jiang Pengji leaning on the table without a care for her image. Her long hair was tied behind her head and she looked like she had just woken up. There were a few bamboo scrolls and books beside her. Yes, I have. Qiguan Rang walked in and sat not far from her. Although they had only met twice, they had a feeling that they were in tune. Jiang Pengji sat up straight and asked with a smile, how do you feel? Qiguan Rang considered his words. Chief Lu is approachable. I don't think he is as difficult to get along with as the rumors say. I've heard of his pacification of Hu County. I originally thought that this person would be rather aggressive or unruly, worthy of being a great ruler. Now that I see it, he seems rather benevolent. So? Jiang Pengji asked. Qiguan Rang touched his forehead with his hand and said with a smile, "It seems that County Chief Lu has an advisor who is quite fierce and ruthless. From what I saw just now, he is gentle, generous, and benevolent. If it were not for his advisor, I think Chief Lu would have taken over Hu County with a gentle approach. He would not have acted so forcefully by suppressing the local gentry in Hu County. As the saying goes, it is easy to change mountains and rivers, but it is hard to change one's nature. If there is no external influence, one's actions will follow a certain pattern." Whether it was Qiguan Rang or Jiang Pengji, both of them could predict a person's reaction to certain things based on their temperament. Hu County was a tumor that was difficult to cure. The only way to survive was to dig deep and eradicate the source of the disease. According to Lu Shi's temperament, if there was no advisor, Jiang Pengji believed that he would choose a gentler approach. Maybe. But father is not interested in bringing official business into the mansion. I have never heard of the advisor you mentioned. Tell me, what did father say to you just now? What was his expression like? Jiang Pengji usually made friends based on her intuition and judgment. Qiguan Rang had the same temperament. The two of them were surprisingly compatible in some aspects. They felt like old friends when they first met. Qiguan Rang had a deeper feeling about this. Jiang Pengji he thought for a while and described the scene of their meeting. "So, father is quite satisfied with you and pays attention to you?" Qiguan Rang's cold face showed a hint of self-mockery. He was clear about his own status. If Wei Yuan had not thought highly of him and wanted to find a son-in-law, he would have been just a commoner at the border. Half of his blood was from the northern borderline. His social situation and status would have been awkward. When he was young, he was often humiliated by the children around him as a bastard. He did not want to admit that he was lowly, but he had to admit that others would think that he was lowly and despicable. "Lanting, you think too highly of me. I am just a commoner. How can I make Chief Lu look at me in a different light?" Jiang Pengji said casually. "Does Chengjing think that there is nothing about you that is worthy of being looked at?" Qiguan Rang was speechless. He subconsciously wanted to hold his feather fan tightly, but he realized that he did not bring it with him that day. "You have me in a circle. Even if it is a humble statement, it does not make me feel that I am incompetent." "That's right. You are talented and capable. Why can't my father look at you differently?" Chapter 147. The Internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. If the system wasn't upgrading, it would have jumped out to complain. Who else would be as narcissistic as she was? Qiguan Rang sighed and told the truth. "I'm a little nervous about Chief Lu's hospitality." Jiang Pengji laughed. "Why are you so nervous? My sister is only 9 years old. She won't be looking for someone as old as you. So, don't worry. It's good for you that he thinks highly of you. Just accept it." Qiguan Rang was speechless. She had a point. Unlike Feng Jin, who was rendered speechless by Jiang Pengji, Qiguan Rang was not afraid of her at all. "Look at that mouth of yours. I wouldn't be surprised if someone taught you a lesson because of your blabbermouth one day." When Jiang Pengji teased him with a son-in-law joke, he really wanted to teach her a lesson. Jiang Pengji opened her eyes and smiled. "TSK, you really don't know how to play to your strengths and avoid your weaknesses." Qiguan Rang was suspicious. "Play to my strengths and avoid my weaknesses? Those who can out-talk me can't beat me in a fight. Those who can beat me haven't been born yet." Qiguan Rang was speechless. he suddenly wanted to be alone. Jiang Pengji frowned and asked Qiguan Rang, "How do you plan to deal with that?" Although she did not say it explicitly, Qiguan Rang understood her meaning and instantly understood what she was referring to. "It's a bit difficult. The Mengs obviously want to protect Meng Liang. I'm afraid Gong Chao alone won't be able to do anything. Unless..." Qiguan Rang rolled his eyes and smiled darkly. "I can't do it openly. I'll have to resort to trickery. Without the protection of the Mengs, who would care about Meng Liang? Do you have a plan?" Jiang Pengji asked. Qiguan Rang thought for a moment and said, "I heard that after the Meng family army appeared to quell the rebellion, the county governor's manor disappeared without a trace. No one knows if he's dead or alive, and there aren't many rumors about him. I have a guess. What would the county chief do if he's not dead? I've asked the merchant about the county military officer in detail, so I have some confidence in my speculation." She paused for a moment before continuing, "Based on that county captain's character, I'm afraid he won't let this go easily. How could he let go of the culprit, Meng Liang, if he could burn down the prefectural governor's mansion and betray the Meng family? Perhaps that person is just hiding his tracks to hunt down Meng Liang. In other words, if Meng Liang is in Hejian County, the county captain is most likely in Hejian County as well." Jiang Pengji listened attentively to Qiguan Rang's words, then laughed. "So, Wenzheng wants to kill with a borrowed knife?" He openly admitted, "Mr. Gong Chao is no match for the Meng family. If you want to take revenge, you can't expose yourself." If he were to be exposed, even if he had a belly full of anger, he would have to suppress it and endure it. If Wei Yuan did not have the confidence to extricate himself from this matter, the Mengs would take revenge on him. By then, his family would be ruined and the price to pay would be too high. Based on these considerations, Wei Yuan had to think it over carefully. Jiang Pengji said, "Wenzheng's thoughts coincide with mine, but I think it's a loss if it's just this." "A loss? Why do you say that?" She stood up and said to Qiguan Rang, "Wenzheng, follow me somewhere. You'll know when you see me." She thought they were going to the Luz, but she had someone prepare a carriage and they drove out of the city. Jiang Pengji did not say a word along the way. Qiguan Rang saw it and closed his eyes, pretending to take a nap. The carriage steadily drove out of the city and toward the farm. The road was bumpy. But the shock absorption system of the carriage was pretty good, so the bumps were bearable. When the driver stopped the carriage and brought out the stool, Qiguan Rang finally lost his cool and asked, "What does Lanting want me to see?" "You'll know in a moment. Come on time, come on time. Look over there." Jiang Pengji jumped out of the carriage willfully, but Qiguan Rang stepped on the stool in a polite manner. Looking in the direction that Jiang Pengji was pointing, he saw more than a dozen figures running out from the dense forest. The weather was cool, but they looked like they had just been fished out of a river. Their clothes were soaked with sweat and stuck to their skin, revealing the contours of their muscles. Their lips were pale, and sweat kept dripping down their cheeks. Taking a closer look, he found that these people's shoulders were covered with a layer of cotton wool, and they were carrying a bamboo basket on their shoulders. Looking at their strenuous movements, the sweat on their foreheads, and the depth of their footprints, it could be seen that the weight in the basket was quite considerable. "These?" Qiguan Rang was confused. "The troops. Mine." Jiang Pengji gave a brief explanation. The dozen or so people jogged past them as if they did not see the two of them. Their panting sounds could be heard. "Wenzheng, take a look and see if these people are lacking something." Qiguan Rang took a closer look. Why isn't there a leader? At this point, he subconsciously paused and suddenly tilted his head to look at Jiang Pengji. "There's no spirit. It doesn't look like training. It's more like they're being tortured. To them, it's just a mission, not a fight for their lives. They're still missing a leader who can unite them." "Are you saying, you want to Aren't you afraid of the Meng's revenge? Qiguan Rang sucked in a breath of cold air. Even though he had an arrogant personality, he was still shocked by her audacity at this moment. She had hinted very clearly that she wanted to recruit the captain who had escaped. So what? Jiang Pengji said indifferently, they relied on their ancestors to get to where they are today. They don't think about improving themselves, and each generation is more useless than the last. Who knows, when the nest is overturned, there will be no unbroken eggs. Dongqing is in danger, and the Mengs can't do anything about it. Qiguan Rang was so shocked that he forgot to speak. He had thought about her words thousands of times in his heart, but he did not dare to say that the country was about to pass away. Jiang Pengji snorted disdainfully. As far as I know, the 4 factions of Nanman and Nanxing are going to have a winner soon. Do you think that Dongqing is connected to Nanxing and has internal and external troubles? If Nanxing is defeated and asks for help, can Dongqing still stay out of it and live peacefully? If Nanxing was destroyed by the 4 factions of Nanman, Dongqing would have to face the joint attack of the 4 factions of Nanman and the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. In order not to fall into such a situation, if Nanxing came to ask for help, Dongqing would have to lend them. Here was the problem. Dongqing emphasized culture and restrained martial arts. The only military general they could send out was the residence of the Count of Zhenbei. Furthermore, the current government was eyeing the military power in the residence of the Count of Zhenbei and saw them as a thorn in their side. Was there still a chance to turn the situation around? Chapter 148. Once they entered the troubled times, the Meng family was just a noble family. Although they had troops, it was limited. They didn't have descendants who could carry the flag. It was already difficult enough for them to survive in the troubled times with the little troops they had. How could they deal with the Meng family? You think too much. Qiguan Rang recovered from his initial shock and composed himself. He had already mentally prepared himself for the shocking news. What else is there? Tell me all at once. With your audacious personality, I don't think this is all you have. Jiang Pengji smiled shyly. Qiguan Rang felt a chill in his heart. He heard her say, my accountant gave me an idea. What idea? Qiguan Rang asked again, and Jiang Pengji briefly explained Su Ke's plan. This is indeed a very bold idea, and it's feasible. However, what's troubling is where will the first batch of rice come from? Jiang Pengji suddenly smiled. I was just worrying about it when Meng Liang appeared. Wouldn't it be a pity if I didn't make use of him? Su Ke was stumped by Jiang Pengji. He didn't know what she was going to do next, but Qiguan Rang could see it clearly. It was precisely because he could see everything clearly that he was dumbfounded by Jiang Pengji's thick skin, which was as thick as the corner of a city wall. Are you trying to tell me that you want to use Meng Liang to exchange for a large amount of grain from the Meng family? Then, you want the captain to kill Meng Liang to vent his anger? You want to tell the public that the captain has already been killed by you. You want to use Meng Liang's life as a favor to recruit the captain and let him bear the anger of the Meng family? How could he be so thick-skinned? You've reaped all the benefits, but you're still acting like you're at a disadvantage. Ah, you forgot something. If the commandant dies in my hands, I can ask the Mengs for another sum of money. Qiguan Rang, not only that, she could also use the grain she got from the Mengs to swindle those aristocratic families who had money and grain. From the beginning to the end, she didn't put in any capital, but after a round of rolling, she was able to earn a lot. Qiguan Rang was puzzled, so he asked an important question. But why are you telling me such an important matter? Jiang Pengji said, Mr. Wei is interested in finding a son-in-law, but Wenjing has no assets. Which of the 3 letters and 6 rights do you want to remove? Qiguan Rang was silent. After a while, he said, is Lanting trying to buy people's hearts with this? Was he that cheap? Telling him all this in the name of roping him in, was actually dragging him down with them. If he failed, everyone would die together. If he succeeded, he would be able to earn a small profit. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that he was at a disadvantage. Jiang Pengji raised her hand and patted his shoulder, but she was short, so she could only pat his arm. It's not about the value of the gift, it's about the thoughtfulness. Caring to the point of taking his life? Qiguan Rang didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but surprisingly, he didn't reject it. He had to admit that Lu Lanting's temperament was just to his liking. They were too compatible. Su Ku heard about Jiang Pengji's arrival and hurried over. He saw his Lang Jun sitting opposite a cold-looking young man. The former was smiling and talking, while the latter's face was still cold, but his expression was gentle and his eyes were full of vigor. "Ku greets you, Lang Jun." Su Ku cupped his hands in greeting, but he secretly sized up Qiguan Rang. A strange look flashed in his eyes. Qiguan Rang saw that Su Ku's face was covered with a thick white cloth, which covered the mark of punishment. He frowned but didn't say a word. "Wenjing, this is my accountant, Su Ku. Su Xiaoyu, I'll leave the troops to him for now." Qiguan Rang's relaxed attitude became serious when he heard Su Ku's name. He didn't miss the fact that the plan Jiang Pengji had mentioned came from this person named Su Ku. He's a brave one. Qiguan Rang's lips curled stiffly. He was more interested in Su Ku now. It was a kind of intuition. It was as if he had smelled the scent of a kindred spirit. Even if Su Ku was different from him, the two of them were quite compatible. Compared to open and above-board schemes, he and Su Ku were more adept at sinister and treacherous schemes. Naturally, their auras were similar. "This is my future brother-in-law." Jiang Pengji stared at Qiguan Rang's gloomy gaze. She was not afraid of lowering his seniority, but it wasn't really lowering his seniority. Qiguan Rang's seniority was lower than Wei Yuan's. He's also an interesting person. Su Ku took the opportunity of cupping his hands in greeting and secretly rolled his eyes. Every time his Lang Jun said that someone was interesting, he knew that the person was probably a black-hearted person. Birds of a feather flocked together. A playmate attracted by his Lang Jun's temperament was definitely not a good person. Jiang Pengji did not avoid Qiguan Rang and asked Su Ku, "Did those people come last night?" Su Ku looked at Qiguan Rang cautiously, but the latter was calm. "They came in the middle of the night." Jiang Pengji's smile brightened. "Did they take everything?" Su Ku nodded. "Yes, they did." Qiguan Rang silently listened to the conversation between the black-hearted master and servant. He secretly broke into a cold sweat for the rumored kind-hearted and honest county chief. "I'll go change my clothes first. Xiaoyu, please entertain Wenjing for me." Jiang Pengji got up and went to the farm master's room to change into a set of brown clothing that was easy to move around in. She was wearing layers of clothing that were complicated and gorgeous, but it still could not change the fact that the bottom part of her clothing was exposed. Without Jiang Pengji present, Qiguan Rang could openly size up Su Ku. He did not have the slightest bit of stage fright, and the two of them exchanged glances. Jiang Pengji, who moved swiftly and efficiently, changed her clothes into a brown one. Although it was popular to be gay these days, the two of them were looking at each other affectionately. As a companion, she was very nervous. Cough, cough, cough. The fake cough that could not be more fake broke the tense atmosphere between the two of them. It was the first time Qiguan Rang saw Jiang Pengji wear brown clothing. He could not help but raise his eyebrows. "Why did you change into this?" Although brown clothing was convenient to move around in, it was worn by commoners or poor families. An aristocratic family like Jiang Pengji wouldn't even touch it, let alone wear it. Moreover, according to the rules of etiquette, it was not in line with etiquette. If some old scholars saw it, they would probably criticize her for not understanding etiquette. Aren't clothes made for people to wear? As long as it's comfortable to wear, then it's a piece of clothing. It's also valuable. It looks gorgeous, but it's a hindrance when you wear it. It's better to hang it on a hanger to admire. Why do you make yourself uncomfortable? Jiang Pengji said indifferently, Wenjing is not a stubborn person. Will you be angry because I'm wearing brown clothing? Chapter 149. When the child heard this voice, he subconsciously stopped sobbing and looked pitifully at the other person with his large, watery eyes. Then, with a loud wail, he turned around and crawled 2 steps towards his friends. Although these children were young, they were very vigilant. In today's world, there were many people who actively sold their children, and there were also many people who racked their brains to kidnap other people's children and sell them. There were only a few tenant farmers in the entire farm, and they were all familiar with each other. When they saw a strange man, and such an ugly one at that, how could they not be shocked? The children screamed and ran in all directions, attracting the attention of the adults who were doing farm work nearby. Nowadays, there were too many black-hearted traffickers who abducted and sold children. Women often gathered together to talk about family trivia. Most of the content was related to trivial matters like rice, oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, and tea. Most of the gossip was about which family's child was taken away by a wolf, or whose child was secretly stolen and sold by a trafficker because the adults were not paying attention, causing the family to be forcibly separated from the flesh and blood. In order to prevent such tragedies from happening in their own homes, the adults often told their children stories of children being kidnapped and sold by human traffickers, or stories of children being eaten by wolves. This was to raise the children's vigilance toward strangers, and also to prevent them from running around casually. Hearing the children's screams, 2 men who were doing farm work hurriedly ran over with a hoe on their shoulders. Go away. What are you trying to do? Stay away from the children, or else I'll hammer you to death with a hoe. One of the tenant farmers threatened with the hoe in his hand, while the other protected the frightened children. The 2 of them stared at the black-faced man as if he was a human trafficker. I'm telling you, this is a noble's farm. If you don't want to die, stay away. The black-faced man's clothes were a little shabby, and there were even some places where there were tears, revealing the bronze skin underneath. He didn't look like a good person, and with the children crying in fear, the 2 tenant farmers were naturally even more wary of the black-faced man. The black-faced man's cheeks blushed, and he waved his hand slightly, indicating that the 2 tenant farmers did not need to be so guarded against him. However, his face was too dark, and it was unknown what kind of coal cinders had stained it. It was impossible to tell if he was blushing or not. No, no. I'm not a bad person. Brothers, you don't have to be like this, I'm just a passerby. No. Don't be like this. He moved a little closer, but not only did the 2 tenant farmers not dispel their suspicions, they became even more vigilant. Not to mention anything else, this black-faced brawny man in front of them was extremely tall and sturdy. He was taller than them by a whole head, with a stocky back and a stocky waist. Even though he was wearing extremely shabby sackcloth clothes, it still couldn't change his oppressive aura. One of the tenants gave the other a look and said, "Since you're just passing by, then hurry up and leave." The black-faced brawny man rubbed his hands and said in a slightly uneasy tone, This. Can I borrow some water to drink? I've been traveling for a few days, and my straw sandals are worn out. I haven't eaten much either. I don't know if the 2 of you can do me a favor. Only then did the 2 tenant farmers notice that the straw sandals on the burly man's feet had been worn out to the point that they had no soles. A few black toes were exposed, and when they noticed that they were staring at them, they moved uneasily. There were even some blisters mixed with blood on them. Seeing the black-faced brawny man's pitiful appearance, and knowing that he really didn't have any ill intentions, the 2 tenant farmers softened their hearts. It wasn't easy for anyone these days. After the alarm was lifted, one of the tenant farmers secretly heaved a sigh of relief. As long as he wasn't a trafficker or a bandit from the nearby mountains, everything would be fine. The atmosphere of the farm was simple, and they took good care of the travelers who passed by. It was normal for them to borrow some water. "Your feet are worn out. If you don't mind, you can wear my shoes first." As he spoke, one of the tenant farmers took off a clean straw sandal from his shoulder and gave it to the black-faced brawny man, indicating for him to put it on. Because straw sandals were very expensive to work in the fields, the tenant farmers were used to having an extra pair when they worked in the fields. This is too much." The black-faced robust man put on a bashful expression, appearing extremely embarrassed. However, under the other party's enthusiastic request, he finally carefully put on the clean, clearly new straw sandals. "Thank you, little brother." The black-faced brawny man's feet were very large, and when he stepped on the straw sandals, they covered the entire upper of the shoes, revealing some of his feet. This is nothing." The tenant farmer smiled in a friendly manner and put down his hoe. He used his other hand to rub the little boy who was carefully clinging to his rolled-up trousers and said, "Don't mind it, there are too many people stealing children out there. Some time ago, I heard that 3 children went missing in a neighboring village, and the mother of the children cried until she was blind. That's why we keep a close eye on the children here." The black-faced brawny man did not mind. Instead, he smiled and said, that's right. The world is so chaotic these days, so children should be taken care of. They are all good, and they even know to cry for adults. In my previous village, when children were stolen, it was always quiet." Speaking of this topic, the tenant farmer's impression of the black-faced brawny man improved. "It's almost time for dinner, why don't you come to my house and eat?" "You naughty child, I scared you just now." The tenant farmer gave the naughty child who was clinging to his trousers a slap that was neither light nor heavy, and his expression showed that he was extremely doting. It was obvious that the crying child who had bumped into the black-faced brawny man was from this tenant farmer's family. The tenant farmer carried the hoe on one hand and carried the naughty child with the other. Like herding sheep, he brought the remaining children back to the village. The black-faced brawny man followed beside the tenant farmer at a moderate pace and sighed. "It's rare to see such a naughty child these days, isn't that so? These days, even the adults don't have enough to eat, so where do they get the money to raise a child?" The tenant farmer sighed. Then, he swept away the sadness on his face and said proudly, "I'm lucky to have met a good master. That's why I'm able to live like this." The black-faced brawny man did not continue asking. He followed the tenant farmer to his house, and the other party shouted at the door. "My child's mother, are the pancakes ready? Give me 2 and boil some hot water. I know you're back. What are you shouting for? Call for your soul." A woman dressed in coarse sackcloth, but her clothes were clean and starched, came out of the house with 2 steaming pancakes in her hands. The tenant farmer called out, "Pour some hot water for this big brother. Drink it while it's hot to warm up." The black-faced brawny man was just about to say that he could just drink some cold water, but the woman had already entered the house. As she walked, she shouted, "You're the only one who's rich. You have to boil water, and the firewood at home is free. Didn't the master say that drinking raw water is bad for the body? I just asked you to boil water, and you're still being stubborn." Chapter 150. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Come on, brother. We don't have anything good to serve you at home. Here are some pancakes we just baked. Eat them while they're hot. The woman came out again and poured hot water and a delicious pancake with some minced meat for the man. The black-faced brawny man wolfed down the flatbread while drinking the boiled water in the ceramic bowl, enjoying the meal with relish. Sigh. I've been to so many places, but this is the only place where I live the best. After he finished 2 pancakes, he still wanted more. The woman saw it and went into the house to get him another pancake. We're lucky to have a good master. Otherwise, the whole family would have to drink the Northwest. The tenant chewed on the pancake and sighed with emotion. The man nodded in agreement and asked casually, "Which family is the master of this place?" "He's so kind. He's like a living Buddha in the temple. I've been to a lot of places, and the tenant farmers there all want to curse the main family. You don't know this, but the master of this place has a great background. Have you heard of the county chief of Hu County? Our master's wife's husband bought this manor from her, and the people in the manor are living a good life now. They can eat some minced meat every few days, unlike in the past. All year round, we could only smell the meat on New Year's Day." The tenant farmer sighed with pride on his face. It was a pity that the master's wife died so early. Almost all the tenant farmers on the farm had to burn 3 sticks of incense a day. "The county chief of Hu County? I've heard of him. He's a good man." The man's expression changed slightly, but his face was too dirty. Ordinary people couldn't tell what had changed. "Isn't that right? In my opinion, the master's family is the best in all of Dongqing. They're not like the other animals. They all suck human blood." The county chief of Hu County, Lu Zhongqing. The man secretly clenched his fists and said, "It's a pity. Otherwise, I'd like to see what a living Buddha looks like." The tenant farmer said quickly, "The master's husband is coming to the village today. If you..." Before he could finish, his wife slapped him on the back of his head. "What nonsense are you talking about? If you offend the master's husband, how can you face the master's wife?" The woman's face was fierce. "Besides, what if you accidentally cause trouble for this brother? Don't even think before you speak. If anything happens, you'll be responsible for it." The woman was indeed worried that the black-faced man would frighten the noble, but she was also thinking for the black-faced man's sake. The reason why nobles were nobles was that they were nobles from head to toe and were timid. If they saw such a rough and burly tramp for the first time, wouldn't they be scared? At that time, if he got angry, he might get into trouble and lose his life. Only then did the tenant farmer realize that something was wrong. He awkwardly chuckled at the black-faced man, revealing a slightly silly smile. The black-faced man did not mind and cupped his hands. "Little brother is too polite. Sister-in-law is right, it's not good to disturb the noble." Although the black-faced man said so himself, the tenant still felt a little embarrassed. Coincidentally, the head of the manor came from outside the fence. He could hear him shouting from afar, "Taizhu, do you still have your fishing rods?" The tenant craned his neck curiously. When he saw it was the head of the manor, his face showed some confusion. "What's wrong, sir?" "The master's husband said he wanted to go fishing with his friend. There are no fishing rods in the village, right? Quick, take them out and use them." The tenant farmer was dumbfounded and mumbled, "The master's husband is such a precious person. It's not good to use my fishing rod, is it?" The head of the manor said impatiently, "I told you to take them out, so take them out. Don't talk so much. It's not like I won't return them to you. I don't care about the fishing rod." The tenant farmer put down the half-eaten biscuit and got up to get a bunch of things from the house, including a variety of fish baskets and bait he made himself. "Do you want to send them to the master's husband now?" "Of course." The head of the manor said, "Also, call 2 people who can swim to protect the master's husband in case something happens. Everyone is busy with farm work now. Where can we get people in such a short time?" The tenant farmer mumbled. The black-faced man rubbed his hands nervously and stammered. Should I go with him? I know how to swim. I can hold my breath in the water." When the head of the manor heard this, he glanced at the black-faced man and then at the tenant farmer. He flatly denied, "No, it's scary. I've been walking in the mountains for a few days. I can wash my face and it's clean. It's not scary." "Sir, he's just passing by. He's quite kind. He heard that the master's husband is nice and thinks he's a living Buddha. He wants to see him from afar. Look, everyone is busy with farm work now. I can't get people who can swim for a while. Why not let him go over and help me? I'll keep an eye on him. I won't let him scare the master's husband. The tenant farmer was a good person and backed up the black-faced man. The head of the manor thought about it. Time was indeed tight, so he simply nodded. However, he still ordered again, keep an eye on him. Don't scare the master. Get him a basin of water to wash his face. It's dirty. The black-faced man thanked him profusely. He tidied up his face and became much cleaner. His face actually looked quite handsome. What kind of fish can we catch at this time of the year? Jiang Pengji sat on the stool gloomily. She didn't know why Qiguan Rang and Su Ku were interested in fishing. The fish at this time of the year are just right. The meat is juicy, and the fish in Hejin County has a lot of bones. Fishing in spring is also very elegant. Su Ku smiled and thanked the tenant farmer for the fishing rod. The man was so shocked that he quickly waved his hand and said that it was fine. You're a landlubber. Be careful not to get caught by the fish. Jiang Pengji moved the stool to another place. Then you guys can continue fishing. Lanting, aren't you coming to play? Qiguan Rang asked. Jiang Pengji was too lazy to look up. She rested her chin on her hand and said with certainty, I can't catch any fish. Then I won't play. Qiguan Rang was amused by her words. No matter how bad one's fishing skills were, there would always be a catch if one was patient. However, he did not know that Jiang Pengji was not being modest or lazy when she said that. The killing intent on her body was very faint, but fish were extremely sensitive creatures. They could sense things that ordinary people could not. It would be strange if Jiang Pengji could catch a fish. Jiang Pengji looked at the two people sitting on the stool, fishing with one fishing rod in each hand. She looked away. She had no interest in such a boring activity. She lifted her leg and kicked the fish basket beside her. She turned her head and saw a pair of eyes that had been observing her. You don't look like a tenant on the farm, she said. The black-faced man's heart skipped a beat when he heard her question. It was as if he had been seen through. However, he still calmed himself down and smiled generously. I'm not from the village. I heard from Taizhu that the master's Lang Jun is a living bodhisattva, so I'm thick-skinned enough to come and take a look. Jiang Pengji asked again, now that you see me, do I look like a living Buddha in the temple? Was she a living Buddha who could scare the nearby fish to Qiguan Rang's side with her aura? The black-faced man chose to remain silent. Chapter 151. Faced with the man's silence, Jiang Pengji couldn't help but laugh. She continued to ask, is this question that hard to answer? The black-faced brawny man cupped his hands in greeting and said awkwardly, no. I'm clumsy, and I haven't learned much. I'm a rude person, so I've never seen a kind-hearted person like you. I was too nervous and forgot how to speak. After saying that, the man's palms were covered in cold sweat. He couldn't get rid of the sense of danger that his identity had been exposed. Jiang Pengji said to the folding stool beside her, sit down. We can chat if we have nothing to do, or else it'll be boring. Stools were easy to carry and easy to place. After they came from the foreign tribes, they quickly became a fashion and were loved by the common people. Usually, when they had nothing to do, they would take a small stool and sit in the yard, chatting with their neighbors and gossiping. However, this kind of portable item also had a common characteristic, which was that it was very delicate and exquisite. Looking at the small folding stool, then looking at his own height, the black-faced brawny man nervously rubbed against the side and sat down. His legs involuntarily exerted force to reduce the pressure his weight exerted on the folding stool. His muscles tensed up, making him look extremely awkward and uncomfortable. Seeing his action, Jiang Pengji's lips curled into a smile. The dark-faced, brawny man's heart skipped a beat and he almost jumped off the stool. Don't be so nervous. You said that I'm a living Buddha, so a living Buddha wouldn't harm anyone, right? Because of her age, Jiang Pengji had not really started to develop. Her voice still had a childish tone, but she pretended to be gentle. Not only did it not make the man feel better, it made him even more nervous. It was a warrior's intuition. Lang Jun, you must be joking. You're so cute. Why would you harm anyone? The man was so nervous that he stuttered. His back was already covered in cold sweat. His forehead was also sweating, and his hands were shaking uncontrollably. Not necessarily. Jiang Pengji picked up a pebble from the ground and threw it into the water skillfully. The pebble bounced 3 times on the surface of the water before falling into the water. I heard from my father that there's an in-law in Meng County in Tsang Prefecture. Their child is really cute. He looks like a girl, and if he wears women's clothes, he'll be able to outshine everyone else. Have you heard of it? The black-faced brute's heart skipped a beat. Not only did he have to suppress the flames of hatred burning in his heart, but he also had to control his expression to avoid giving himself away. He laughed dryly and said, "This lowly one is just a homeless refugee. Who doesn't cover their nose and hide far away when they see me? I've already eaten 1 meal today, so how could I have the chance to hear about the matters of the nobles? So you haven't heard of him? That's a pity. I was going to say that you might be able to meet him someday." Jiang Pengji shook her head pitifully. Her last words made the black-faced brute clench his fists, and his thick lips moved uncontrollably. She seemed to be blind and did not notice the black-faced brute's abnormality. One of her hands was skipping the pebble in the water, and the other hand was supporting her chin on her knee. I originally thought that a man looks like a girl was just a rumor. No matter how beautiful a man looks, he's still a rough man. He can't be compared to a real girl. I didn't expect to see him in person 2 days ago, and he's even more beautiful than a fairy. The black-faced brute had mixed feelings. He was afraid that Jiang Pengji would see through his identity. He was ecstatic that he had found Meng Liang's whereabouts, but he was also furious. His hatred almost made him lose his mind. But in the end, he regained his senses. They were in Hejian County, and since the person in front of him was Lu Shi's son, there was no way he could do anything to him. Meng Liang was hiding in the Lu's house, which was indeed a difficult task. If he acted rashly, he was afraid that he and his brothers would be killed. Because of his emotions, his voice was a little hoarse. He said with difficulty, "This lowly one is afraid of what?" Jiang Pengji smiled and patted the man's left shoulder with the back of her hand. She said in a flirtatious tone, "You can come to see me, a living bodhisattva, out of curiosity. Why don't you have the curiosity to see a real fairy?" The black-faced brute was dumbfounded. The conversation between the two was very quiet. Qiguan Rang and Su Ku were fishing more than 20 meters away, so naturally, they could not hear what they were talking about. But Qiguan Rang was a smart man, and Su Ku was a reserve soldier who was about to evolve into a smart man. The two of them were not easy to deal with. They could not hear what the two were talking about, but it did not stop them from guessing. Smart people had that kind of confidence. I'm really worried for the county military chief. Lanting is starting to be naughty again. Qiguan Rang stared straight ahead. He did not even turn his neck. He looked straight ahead, as if he was very serious about fishing. Su Ku wanted to complain, but Jiang Pengji was his superior, and she had super sharp ears. It was hard to guarantee that she would not hear him from such a distance. How do you know that is the county military chief that Lang Jun is looking for? Su Ku's lips moved slightly. His voice was as soft as a mosquito, so only he and Qiguan Rang could hear him. Even if he is not the county military chief, he must be one of his followers. Otherwise. Look at your Lang Jun. Why would she smile so confidently? She looks more like a cat that is trying to suppress a mouse and pretending to be kind. One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. Su Ke was silent. Qiguan Rang was right. His Lang Jun did not like to do meaningless things because it was a waste of time. Once she showed interest, it would only prove that the other party was beneficial to her, and that it was worth her time. Other than that, Qiguan Lang Jun does not have his own judgment? Su Ke asked. Even though he knew that Qiguan Rang was also someone that his Lang Jun had her eyes on, he could not help but want to find out more about him. Qiguan Rang did not get angry at Su Ke's provocation. Instead, his eyes flashed with a hint of mockery. Didn't you notice that the big brute is sitting right next to Lanting? If he was a real refugee, how would he have the guts to sit next to the son of a noble family? Even if Jiang Pengji allowed it, a normal person would not dare to sit with the other party out of fear and apprehension to avoid getting into trouble. When Qiguan Rang mentioned his name, Su Ke suddenly realized something. His hand that was holding the fishing rod stopped. The fish that was about to take the bait was startled and swam away. After a while, Su Ke hung the bait on the hook again and continued to talk in a low voice. Qiguan Langjuan's eyesight is indeed admirable. I now understand why Lang Jun likes you so much. Qiguan Rang pursed his thin lips and said, I think that Lanting has already guessed the other party's identity when they first met. Huh? Chapter 152. Su Ke heard his words and raised his eyebrows. Does that mean that Qiguan Lang Jun was once a victim? Qiguan Rang strangely chose to remain silent. He was indeed a victim, but he still did not know how Su Ke knew so much just by meeting him. However, Qiguan Rang vaguely knew something after witnessing this person trick the county commandant. That person's eyes could truly be said to be able to see through the finest details. Su Ke smiled and said, it's a good thing that Lang Jun is so capable. At least he won't be deceived by the scoundrel and will be able to catch him in the act. However, there are pros and cons to this. This will inevitably make him stubborn and hard to persuade. Too much trust in her own eyes and judgment. To put it bluntly, she was conceited. If the opinions of others went against her, the result would be gratifying. Logically speaking, such an overly conceited person was not a good candidate because the people under him would have a headache. If he disagreed with her and neither of them could convince the other, then who would give in the end? Qiguan Rang listened carefully and asked in a low voice, if that's the case, aren't you worried about yourself, Xiaoyu? Su Ke said, even so, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. Lang Jun may be conceited, but he still knows his limits. If someone disagrees with him, they still have to be reasonable. He still listens to other people's opinions. Other than that, Lang Jun doesn't like to interfere in areas that he's not good at. This is much more likable than those idiots who want to criticize others. After saying this, Su Ke added, moreover, even if that's not the case, Ke's slave contract is still in his hands. I can't fly away even if I have wings. The earlier I accept my fate, the earlier I get rid of unnecessary worries. Otherwise, I'll worry about nothing and make myself uncomfortable. When Qiguan Rang heard the words, slave contract, he was stunned for a moment. He did not expect Su Ke to sell himself into the Lu residence. Su Ke's demeanor and aura were not something an ordinary servant could have. I was young and frivolous. I did something wrong and fell into a wolf's den. Su Ke sounded like he was complaining, but whether it was the expression on his face or the relaxed smile in his tone, it showed that he was not angry. For a period of time, I was so scared that I couldn't sleep at night. Qiguan Rang furrowed his brows and said, although Lanting's temperament is strange, her way of doing things is still considered proper. How can she scare you? I didn't say that Lang Jun was scared. Lu Shi's poisonous gaze from that day was still a frequent visitor to his nightmares. The two of them chatted in low voices. Their voices were as soft as the buzzing of a mosquito and could not be heard from a few steps away. No matter how good Jiang Pengji's hearing was, her mind and attention were not on the two fishermen. Meng Han, the black-faced brawny man in disguise. He tried his best to bring the topic back to Meng Liang, but Jiang Pengji acted as if she didn't realize it. She just chatted with him and asked him about the interesting things she had seen along the way. The topic went around in circles, but Jiang Pengji still held the initiative. In the end, she suddenly sent an invitation to Meng Han, her eyes sincere and earnest. It's not easy to measure so much land with one's feet in the short span of 100 years. I'm a little envious. He had been trapped in Hejian County since he was young and had never been to other places. The Central Plains is so vast. I really want to see it. Looking at Jiang Pengji's longing and innocent expression, Meng Han suddenly saw his daughter. She used to complain to him about being trapped in the inner courtyard. She couldn't gallop like him, couldn't risk her life for the family, and couldn't build a career. He twitched the corner of his mouth and said bitterly, Lang Jun, you haven't experienced any hardships. The outside world is full of barren hills and unruly rivers. Even if you stay at home, disaster will fall from the sky. Leaving home, leaving your homeland, it's even harder to move. You have to eat and sleep in the open every day. It's so hard. There's always a first time for everything. You can't give up your desire to go out just because of this, right? Jiang Pengji said carelessly, what's more, if I go out, I'll have servants to protect me. How much hardship can I go through? She suddenly changed the topic and looked at Meng Han with sparkling eyes. You've been to so many places and met so many people. You must have accumulated a lot of experience. I can see that you're tall and strong. You're no worse than the servants in my house. By the way, didn't you say that you have no family and can't go back to your homeland because of the war? Why don't you just stay in the Luz? At least you'll have a place to settle down. If I go out one day, I'll take you with me. It'll save me a lot of trouble. Meng Han's lips moved. He opened and closed them for a long time before he said something. Lang Jun, you're a living Buddha, but I'm just a peasant. I don't dare to dirty your land. I won't go. If he was a normal refugee, he would have said yes with gratitude. But Meng Han wasn't one, and he couldn't say yes. He didn't want to drag the Luz down because of his identity. Even if he didn't understand the dirty dealings between the gentry families, Meng Han knew that Lu Shi and Meng Zhan had cut off all ties. Meng Liang, that little bastard, must have used another identity to sneak into the Luz. If Meng Liang died in the Luz and the Mengs found out, they would definitely make things difficult for the Luz and ask them to hand him over. No, they would probably make the entire Luz pay. Although he vaguely felt that this Lu Shi before him was a little strange, after interacting with him for a while, he found that Lu Shi was indeed amiable and approachable. Moreover, he was extremely concerned about issues such as the people's livelihood. He wasn't like some of the aristocratic sons he had come into contact with in the past, who were always sentimental and worried about unreliable things. They were disgusting and would moan about nothing. Meng Han had a good impression of Jiang Pengji because of that. But he couldn't say yes to her invitation. As expected, Jiang Pengji, who had a good temper in Meng Han's eyes, wasn't angry or embarrassed. Instead, she sighed with regret. Jiang Pengji said, everyone has their own ambitions. Since you've made up your mind, I won't force you to stay. The sky was getting dark. Qiguan Rang and Meng Han had caught 2 baskets of fish. Meng Han couldn't get any more information out of them, so he decided to leave. Before he left, Meng Han took a bag with him. 2 sets of warm clothes, a few pairs of oversized straw sandals, cotton socks, a few days' worth of dry food, and some medicine. Jiang Pengji explained, I saw that you have blisters on your feet, so I asked someone to prepare some medicine for you. Otherwise, if you get bitten by mosquitoes, your wounds will fester very easily. That would be troublesome. Meng Han's heart warmed. After some hesitation, he accepted the small but thoughtful gift. Qiguan Rang and Su Ku, who had watched the whole show, laughed. Chapter 153. Lang Jun, do you need someone to keep an eye on him? Su Ku asked in a low voice after Meng Han was out of sight. There's no need for that. He'll come back anyway. Jiang Pengji was not worried that Meng Han could escape. After all, Meng Liang was still in the Lu residence. With Meng Han's current ability, he could not ignore the Lu residence and kill Meng Liang. Oh? Qiguan Rang said, why are you so confident? Why can't Meng Han wait for Meng Liang to leave? Jiang Pengji sneered. First, the Lu residents and the Mengs are not on good terms. They might not be willing to protect Meng Liang. Meng Han still has a small chance of succeeding. If Meng Liang contacts his entourage, he will be protected by them. With Meng Han's current manpower, it will be impossible for him to kill Meng Liang. So, if he wants to make a move, now is the best time. Qiguan Rang was speechless. He secretly exchanged a knowing look with Su Ku. I'm a little curious. Why did you suspect that he was Meng Han from the beginning? Qiguan Rang asked. Jiang Pengji heard the question and looked at Qiguan Rang. Isn't it obvious? I didn't suspect that he was Meng Han. I was sure that he was from the beginning. Even if he deliberately disguised himself, his technique was clumsy and there were flaws everywhere. Qiguan Rang cupped his hands and asked, flaws? I wonder if Lanting can clear my doubts. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but the area between his thumb and index finger, that is, there are obvious calluses. That's the mark left behind by playing with weapons like swords, spears, swords, and halberds for a long period of time. He has the waist of a bear and the back of a tiger, and the muscles on his upper arms are knotted. His clothes are old and tattered. He looks like he's down and out. But because of that, his wounds are exposed. There are a lot of deep wounds. From the wounds, we can roughly determine what weapon caused them. After Jiang Pengji finished, she added, from this, we can determine the occupation of the other party. Other than that, although this person's toes have bloody blisters from walking, the marks are very fresh. They should have been made recently. The calluses on her feet are old and thin, which means that she once had a hard time. However, it didn't last very long. After that, the boots she wore were all soft and comfortable. Her living conditions improved a lot. Although there are calluses, they aren't thick. Not only that, he is literate. There are traces of painstaking practice on his right hand. If one started to practice calligraphy from childhood, even the most inattentive and crafty students would have their knuckles slightly deformed. The degree of deformity varied from person to person. However, although this person's fingers show signs of calligraphy practice, the knuckles are not deformed. This means that this person has been practicing calligraphy for about 19 or 20 years, and his body's skeleton is more or less fixed. Jiang Pengji analyzed as she held out her right hand for them to see. Qiguan Rang and Su Ku were both dumbfounded. They could not help but stretch out their hands. There was indeed a little mark on their knuckles. In order for the two of them to hear her clearly, Jiang Pengji slowed down her speech and tried her best to explain the content in detail so that the two of them would not be able to make sense of it. But even so, after listening to her analysis and the final conclusion, they were even more dumbfounded. Su Ku's eyes were filled with shock. He asked after a long time. Lang Jun, you said, You knew the identity of the other party as soon as they met. Does this mean that you have already thought so much when you first saw him? He swallowed nervously. If that was the case, wouldn't it be a little too scary? Something like that. Jiang Pengji shrugged nonchalantly. She had stood out among so many genetic warriors. How could she not have some concrete evidence? Qiguan Rang looked down and said, "What's so surprising about that? I have also heard that Master Yuanjing of Langjia is proficient in the art of Qimen Duanjia and is also proficient in physiognomy. Not only can he tell the origin of the person as soon as he sees him, but he can even predict what happened before and after. It's amazing." As soon as Su Ke heard that, a lot of rumors about the demon Yuanjing of Langjia floated into his mind. When he put the two of them together, he suddenly felt that compared to him, his Langjun seemed to be in the category of a normal human being. He had not become a demon or a demon. Jiang Pengji secretly glanced at Qiguan Rang with a hint of warning and sharpness in her eyes. She still remembered that in her previous life, she had retired from the first echelon of genetic warriors and entered the military to serve as a normal soldier. Her ability was gradually known by the people around her. She had long gotten used to the strange looks and the fear and alienation of the people around her. Su Ke was not a big deal. Did she need Qiguan Rang's help to ease the atmosphere? The sky was getting darker. It was time for Jiang Pengji to return to the loos. Su Ke had to busy himself with the farm, so he naturally could not follow her. Jiang Pengji's face was still cold when she got into the carriage. Qiguan Rang clicked his tongue and patted Su Ke's shoulder. "Young man, good luck." Su Ke was confused. What the hell was with Qiguan Rang's pitiful expression? Jiang Pengji felt that the carriage was already moving. She said coldly, "Next time, you don't have to be a busybody." Qiguan Rang shook his head disapprovingly and said meaningfully, "Lanting, that's not right." "What's wrong?" Jiang Pengji's mood was slightly bad when she thought of some unpleasant memories. "Lanting, do you know what it means to be a ruler?" Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes and looked at him with a complicated expression. "Continue." Qiguan Rang continued, "You can't be stubborn and refuse to listen to others. It's important to open up a wide range of opinions. You can't lose yourself. Otherwise, if your subordinates have different opinions, how will the ruler make a choice? You can't be too close to your subjects to avoid messing up the hierarchy. You can't disobey orders and prohibitions. But you can't be too distant and lose the people's trust. In my opinion, ruling a country and ruling a family have the same effect." After saying that, Qiguan Rang asked, "If Xiaoyu is really afraid of you, will Lanting let him be?" Jiang Pengji was silent. Lu Shi's words appeared in her mind. "Lanting, you have to learn how to be a ruler. Your eyes can see so many things. This is something that others don't have, and it's also your unique advantage. You should make people respect you, not just fear you. It's a difference of one word, but it's a world of difference." Qiguan Rang didn't care how much Jiang Pengji would listen to him. After all, he had already said it. The so-called way to be a ruler did not have a very specific or general description. It all depended on one's understanding and experience. Su Ke was not fully grown yet. His words and actions were inevitably not comprehensive, which made Lanting feel apprehensive. Lanting had a stubborn temperament. She did not care why Su Ke had such a reaction, nor would she take the initiative to point it out. It was fine if it happened once or twice, but if it went on, it was hard to guarantee that it would not leave a hidden crack between them. Chapter 154. Qiguan Rang tapped his knees with his fingers hidden in his sleeves. He closed his eyes leisurely as if he was taking a nap. If Jiang Pengji was unhappy before, she started to reflect on herself after Qiguan Rang's words. She suddenly remembered what her superior and mentor from her previous life, who was also the former commander of the 7th Army Corps, had said. The old commander said, "You're not my only student. Out of all the candidates, you're not even my favorite successor. You're full of bad habits, and your temper is beyond redemption. However, I can understand you, and in the end, I still chose you. Because I always believe that you can be my ideal successor. Other than you, I can't think of anyone else who can do it." The old commander trusted her so much, but Jiang Pengji did not achieve his expectations. She did not even know why she could not do it. "The way of the superior is to rule the inferior," Jiang Pengji murmured. She seemed to understand something. Qiguan Rang was moved by her expression, but he had to pretend that he did not care. Lanting can choose to hide some things, but there are some things that cannot be left unsaid. This will only increase the gap between people. No matter how good their relationship is, no matter how loyal they can't withstand this kind of torture. It's lucky that Xiaoyu hasn't realized it yet. Qiguan Rang did not know if Su Ku was too young or too slow to react. How could he make such a low-level mistake? However, everyone was a saint, and everyone made mistakes. It was okay to make mistakes, as long as they could make up for it. It was scary to make a mistake without realizing it. Fortunately, Qiguan Rang admired both Jiang Pengji and Su Ku. Neither of them had the kind of personality that would give people headaches. Su Ku was quick-witted. Although he had broken some taboos, it could be attributed to the fact that he had not been with Jiang Pengji for long and was not familiar with her temperament. In addition, he was still young and inexperienced. Qiguan Rang was confident that he could make up for these mistakes slowly. As for Jiang Pengji's state, it was even more than he had expected. Jiang Pengji snapped out of her trance and looked at the person beside her. "Why are you telling me this?" Qiguan Rang told the truth. "I just think that Lanting needs to be enlightened." If Lu Shi's ambition was merely to become a national treasure and a pillar of the country, then the other party naturally did not need to know how to control it. However, Qiguan Rang felt that this person's ambition was the complete opposite of his harmless appearance. However, it was far from enough just to have lofty aspirations. Without the corresponding conditions, it would be difficult to achieve great things in the end. Lu Shi was smart enough, and his ability to read people was terrifying enough. Whether it was in terms of breadth of mind or courage, he seemed to be the most satisfactory person he had ever met. However, the most important thing was that he was not good enough. He could even be considered clumsy and failed. Jiang Pengji could not help but roll her eyes. However, he still said to Qiguan Rang, "I'll thank you in advance for today's matter. I'll treat you to a formal feast next time when I have time." In response to Jiang Pengji's words, Qiguan Rang's reply made the smile on her face freeze, because he said, "Even though I haven't known Lanting for long, I understand the principle that those who are unaccountably solicitous are hiding evil intentions. Even if you're treating me to a banquet to thank me, the purpose behind it is definitely not as simple as just thanking me." Qiguan Rang unceremoniously exposed him. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Had her reputation become that bad? Did she have to be so jittery? She had only shown a little goodwill, and the other party was scared witless and defensive? She did not know that Qiguan Rang had already labeled her as a scheming boy after witnessing her trick the pitiful captain. However, despite his complaints, Qiguan Rang's alertness and vigilance were still commendable, because she really did not have good intentions. Jiang Pengji said, "You can't say that. Gratitude is the main priority." Qiguan Rang lazily lifted his eyelids and looked as if he had expected it. "Then what's the main priority?" Jiang Pengji hesitated for a moment, then finally revealed her plan. "The little bastard Meng Liang who stays in the Lu residence suffered a loss at my mother's side. Now he wants to get close to me to arouse my mother's pity and love. But this person has always been ignorant and incompetent. He doesn't have any skills, but he is very good at leading bad people. Wenjing, do you think I should take the bait? Qiguan Rang felt pity for Meng Liang. What does Lanting plan to do? He's a playboy. He's good at a few things: eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling. Meng Liang is not a fan of good food, nor is he a good drinker. He only has a soft spot for women and gambling. If he wants to kidnap me, a place like the southern brothel is not suitable. The perfume on my body will be easily exposed, and my mother will hate me. So, Qiguan Rang said, so he will most likely urge you to go to the gambling house? I also hope to go to the gambling house. It will be easier for me then, and then? The gambling house is a place where good and bad people mingle. Do you think Meng Hun will take advantage of this great opportunity to kidnap Meng Liang? Qiguan Rang was speechless. Could he say that he had already understood Jiang Pengji's plan? If Meng Liang really did urge Jiang Pengji to go to the gambling house, that place would not only be chaotic, but it would also be easy for news to spread. How could Meng Hun not think of a way to ambush and kidnap Jiang Pengji? More importantly, Meng Hun would not kidnap Jiang Pengji because he was indebted to her. As long as Jiang Pengji returned to the Luz as if nothing had happened and ordered a servant girl to pretend to be the lady's maiden to leave the Luz, Meng Liang's disappearance and even death would have nothing to do with the Luz. Meng Hun and his men would be the ones to blame. Then, she would contact Meng Hun in secret under other names. She would explain the benefits involved and force Meng Liang to write a letter asking for the grain. When the grain was in her hands, Jiang Pengji would kill Meng Hun and his men in the name of cleaning up the bandits. Their identities would be hidden. On the surface, she would be the one avenging Meng Liang. How could the Mengs not show any gratitude to their benefactor? If they cleaned up the loose ends, the Mengs would only find out that Meng Liang was captured and killed by Meng Hun. The Luz would never get involved. What an affectionate and righteous woman. She wiped out the bandits, maintained the peace, and avenged the Mengs, the Luz, for their son's death. Her generosity was admirable. Not only that, Meng Hun and his men would be grateful to Jiang Pengji for taking them in when they were in danger. It was all a trap. He had seen shameless people, but he had never seen someone who treated shamelessness as a virtue. What made him feel even more helpless was that Qiguan Rang liked shameless people. He could already foresee how poor Meng Liang would be played to death. It doesn't matter if Meng Liang is dead or not. What matters is the grain. How much do you think I should ask the Mengs for? Before Qiguan Rang could answer, he heard a crisp beeping sound. Chapter 155. The system's cheerful voice traveled into her ears. Yo! Did the host miss me? Jiang Pengji said mercilessly, no. Without you, I don't know how peaceful my ears would be. After the system's upgrade, it seemed to have become more humane and thick-skinned. It wasn't like before, when it would whine when it was choked. After the upgrade, the system understood that it was its host, and they couldn't be separated. No matter how much Jiang Pengji disliked it, she needed it. As an omnipotent system, it could fulfill all of its host's ambitions and wishes. Jiang Pengji dealt with Qiguan Rang while she asked the system, you said you needed 12 hours to upgrade, but why do I feel like you've been upgrading for almost 24 hours? I thought I'd have to stream today as usual. The system said evasively, the estimation of the upgrade time was wrong, so it took more time than expected. Jiang Pengji laughed in her heart, but she didn't continue to ask about it. Instead, she asked something else. You said you've upgraded once. You can't be as useless as before, right? Jiang Pengji never hid her disdain for the system. The system had been sad many times because of it. Tell me about it. If you're still as useless as before, I think you should upgrade again. Time isn't a problem. You can upgrade as long as you want. Being ridiculed so mercilessly by her, the system became unhappy again. The system said proudly, "You ignored me yesterday, but you might not be able to reach me today." Listening to the system's tone, Jiang Pengji seemed to be able to imitate its proud expression. "Oh? Tell me about it. I want to know to what extent a useless system can be upgraded." The system suppressed its urge to explode. It pretended to cough twice and cleared its throat. Then the host should listen carefully. In order to provide a more complete and convenient service for the host, the upgrade added a humanized emotion section. This will make it easier for us to communicate. To increase the host's popularity as a streamer and increase the viewability of the stream, the real-time task section has also been added. The real-time task section? Jiang Pengji frowned in her heart, but she didn't show any signs of abnormality. The system said excitedly, "The system will analyze the people and things that the host has experienced in real time and issue temporary missions from time to guide the host to integrate into this era more perfectly. When the host completes the missions perfectly, the host will receive additional rewards." Jiang Pengji went straight to the point and asked, "Can I refuse such a mission?" The system quickly replied, "No, this is a mission automatically added to the mission list. Completing it will only bring benefits to the host." Jiang Pengji sneered in her heart. There would be no harm in completing the task, but what if she refused to complete it or failed the task? Jiang Pengji was disgusted from the bottom of her heart when someone else's will was forced upon her. The system became more capricious. It sensitively discovered that Jiang Pengji was not enthusiastic about this matter. She even rejected and hated it. It said carefully, "The host seems to be very unwilling to do this kind of task. Why should I be willing to do a task that is forced upon me? What if the mission's contents conflict with my own wishes? What if I refuse to go on the mission? Or will the mission fail?" Jiang Pengji asked a few questions in a row. The system had no time to answer. "I don't care about the rewards for completing the mission. Who allowed you to make such a decision on your own?" The system was speechless. Then, its voice became more forceful. "I hope that the host will not be capricious. This is the most correct and most beneficial outcome after countless calculations. As your system, I will only be good if you are good. I hope you can understand this." Jiang Pengji snorted coldly. "You can give me the mission if you want. It's my business whether I do it or not." The system lowered its voice and said seriously, "Host, please do not be capricious. Completing the mission will make your future path smoother. This is the conclusion I came up with after countless calculations. I hope that you will not disappoint my good intentions. Real-time triggered missions are mainly for the host's benefit. They will not harm you." Jiang Pengji dragged her voice. "I will not do it." The system was silent for a while and said earnestly, "If the host insists on being capricious, you will regret it. You must know that benefits and risks coexist. There will be generous rewards for completing the mission. If you fail the mission or don't do it, you will have to bear the consequences of failing the mission." Jiang Pengji's thin lips curved. She lowered her eyes to hide the faint killing intent brewing in them. The system's words caused her to rebel. She said it angrily. "I'll bear the consequences. Do you think that I, Jiang Pengji, will be threatened?" It was useless for the system to be anxious. Jiang Pengji had completely developed a rebellious mentality. The more it looked forward to it, the more she was unwilling to do it. In the end, the system could only say angrily, "My good intentions have been turned against me. Host, you will suffer greatly if you do this." It thought that Jiang Pengji would be wild with joy, so the system took the liberty of downloading and upgrading the real-time triggered mission section to help the host reach the peak of her life. It remembered that many systems did the same thing. The host's eyes went wide when she saw the mission reward. The host, on the other hand, was basically a donkey. She had a stubborn temper, but her reaction was so intense and determined. Jiang Pengji only replied with one sentence. I'm tired today. I don't feel like streaming for now. Be quiet if there's nothing else. I have a headache. The system wanted to use both carrot and stick on her to force her to submit? The system did not seem to realize Jiang Pengji's true temperament. Even her former teacher would not be able to do that, let alone a system of unknown origin, purpose, and behavior. Qiguan Rang noticed that Jiang Pengji's face was a little pale. Are you not feeling well? Jiang Pengji answered weakly without opening her eyes. The ride is too bumpy. I have a headache. She did have a headache. After the system upgrade, it was more annoying than she had expected. Was the ride very bumpy? Qiguan Rang was stunned. Could he say that compared to Master Chao's carriage, the Lu residence's carriage was much more stable? The two of them were silent the whole way until the carriage stopped in front of the Lu's. It was already past dinner time. Lu Shi and Wei Yuan were chatting happily. When they saw Jiang Pengji return with Qiguan Rang, they were both happy. After exchanging some pleasantries, Wei Yuan stood up and said goodbye to Lu Shi. Since they had achieved their goal, there was no need to stay in the Lu's house any longer. Lu Shi stood up and saw them off. Jiang Pengji returned to her courtyard. She did not even change her clothes. She rolled onto the bed and fell asleep. Before she could get sleepy, Nongqin's frightened voice came from outside the door. Lang Jun, the guest from the outer court is here to see you. Jiang Pengji lifted her blanket and her face darkened. Chapter 156. As Qiguan Rang left with Wei Yuan asked him urgently. Wenjing, what do you think of Lanting? Qiguan Rang tilted his head to look at Wei Yuan. He wondered what Lu Shi had said to Wei Yuan. Why did he suddenly ask such a question? In my opinion, this child is extraordinary. As Qiguan Rang spoke, he observed Wei Yuan's face, which seemed to be deep in thought. In times of peace, he would be a powerful minister and an important asset to the country. In times of chaos, he would at least be a lord. Wei Yuan's expression froze, as if he was still struggling with something. After a long time, he let out a long sigh. I just tested Lu Zhongqing. I'm afraid the current situation. Wei Yuan was not Jiang Pengji. He could not say things like directly saying that the country was about to perish. The aristocratic families have their own agendas. They are playing with the power of the court. The princes are not doing anything. The battle between Nansheng and the four factions of Nanman is not optimistic. It is already showing signs of decline. Although Wei Yuan's surname was Wei, his family was not prominent. He could only be considered wealthy among the poor. Seeing the declining situation, his heart ached, but he could not do anything about it. Among the 5 countries in the Central Plains, who did not insist that they were the legitimate rulers? Since the division of the Xia kingdom, everyone knew that there would be a war between the 5 countries. Who did not covet the other 4 countries? However, since the founding of Dongqing, they had always valued culture and restrained military power. Due to the frequent harassment from the 3 tribes of the northern borderline, the people at the border were poor. The soldiers did not have the opportunity to rest and recuperate. They were like old horses that had traveled long distances with empty stomachs. They were now exhausted. Not to mention, the aristocratic families controlled the court. There were also many vermin of the country who exploited the people, causing great resentment among the people. Even Lu Shi was barely able to protect himself in Hu County. The other aristocratic families hadn't tried to divide Hu County because Lu Shi's methods of governing Hu County were too bloody. His attitude was very domineering, as if he would rather die in glory than live in dishonor. Wei Yuan knew Lu Shi. Although he was a bit evil, he was a peaceful person. He could not stand open strife and veiled strife. He was forced to do this because he had no other choice. Wei Yuan sighed. If Nansheng could defeat the 4 factions of Nan Man, we would have a chance to breathe, but it was better to be a dog in prosperity than a man in chaos. If they could live a peaceful life, no one would want to live every day with blades, spears, swords, and halberds, for fear that one day they would lose their lives. Qiguan Rang was not as emotional as Wei Yuan. He said calmly, Master Gongqiao, you must know that the world is divided after a long period of union, and united after a long period of union. Now that the 5 countries are not giving way, chaos is only a matter of time. It's all the same whether it's earlier or later. Wei Yuan's expression was one of helplessness. Although that was what he said, he still found it hard to accept. After all, the current situation was not only inevitable, but also human greed. Those high and mighty aristocratic families didn't care. Regardless of whether it was a chaotic era or a prosperous era, it wouldn't affect their wealth at all. It was just that the common people were pitiful. It was difficult for them to leave their homeland, but once the flames of war spread, they could only leave their homes. He, Wei Yuan, was just a teacher with no background. No matter how anxious he was, he could only watch helplessly. There was nothing he could do. Qiguan Rang continued, Mr. Gongqiao just asked Rang how Lanting was. Is County Chief Lu's intention? Wei Yuan scowled. Watch your words. How can you say something like that? I'm just going to wait and see. Regardless of whether it was true or not, being on good terms with Lu Shi was beneficial to them. Qiguan Rang was silent. Even though Wei Yuan didn't give him a specific answer, he knew very well that regardless of whether Lu Shi had the intention to cause trouble or not, his son was someone who wanted to see the world in chaos. He wasn't someone who was willing to be under someone else's command. The carriage was silent. Wei Yuan and Qiguan Rang returned to their residences with their own thoughts. On the other side, Jiang Pengji's patience had reached its limit. She stared coldly at Meng Liang, who was still acting recklessly. She had seen people who wanted to die, but she had never seen someone who wanted to die at such a good time. Meng Liang was still dressed in women's clothing. He looked shy, but the condescending look in his eyes betrayed his true feelings. Jiang Pengji's impatience had reached its peak. She could have slapped him in the face the next second. The system was enough to annoy her. She wanted to be alone, but she didn't expect an even more disgusting *T stir to come at her. Why are you looking for me? You and I are men and women. Even though I'm still young, being in the same room will still attract criticism. Jiang Pengji's tone was very stiff, with a hint of impatience. Meng Liang had been spoiled since he was a child. Others had always been the ones to look up to him. When had he ever had the chance to observe others? He didn't realize how bad Jiang Pengji's mood was. Even if Meng Liang was there to build a relationship, Jiang Pengji should have taken the initiative to flatter him. Does cousin Lanting not like me? Other than the first time I came to the Lu residence, I haven't seen you at all. Jiang Pengji took a deep breath. Cousin, you're almost 15 years old. Men and women should be different. Why would I look for you for no reason? What a boring blockhead. Meng Liang secretly spat and said, even so, it's not a bad thing for cousins to be a little closer to each other. Plus, I'm here alone with a few servants to visit my aunt. I'm not familiar with the place and the people. It's boring. If that's the case, why do you want to see me? Jiang Pengji couldn't be bothered to feign civility. She went straight to the point. She was not in a good mood at the moment. Since someone had come to get into the muzzle, if she did not vent her anger, wouldn't she be even more sullen? Meng Liang's cheeks were red. He asked quietly, does Lanting know any fun places here? Jiang Pengji clicked her tongue in her heart. What fun places could there be in this ancient era that was so backward? But she still said indecently, there are fun places, but you're a woman. It's not convenient for you to go. She had made it so clear. Meng Liang was an experienced player. How could he not understand what she was talking about? If it was any other time, he would have just teased her and asked her to go for a walk. But he was a woman now. It was not appropriate for him to be too enthusiastic. It was also not convenient for him to go to such places. Thus, he pretended to be coquettish. Cousin, do you hate me that much? How could you say such inappropriate things? Hypocrite. Jiang Pengji snorted in her heart. She suppressed the surging disgust in her heart. Seeing that Jiang Pengji didn't reply, Meng Liang was slightly unhappy. He had such a beautiful face, but someone didn't take the bait. Chapter 157. Meng Liang twisted the handkerchief in his hand and said awkwardly, I heard from a few servants that there is no curfew in Hejian, and it's very lively at night. It's rare for me to be here, so I want to go and have a look. But my aunt isn't feeling well, and my uncle is busy with work. If I go out alone, wouldn't my reputation be tarnished if I run into some hooligans? That's why I'm here to look for you. Jiang Pengji smiled coldly. Since he was asking for it, he couldn't blame her for being ruthless. Besides, which noble lady didn't have servants around her when she went out to play? How pretentious. She said awkwardly, but you're a woman after all. If you go out with me like this, people will gossip. What if your reputation is ruined? If you're really bored, I can let the maidservants play with you in the yard. If you go out. Meng Liang secretly gritted his teeth. He didn't expect Lu Shi to be such a sanctimonious hypocrite. He was already tempted, but he had to pretend to be inviolable and say that he was doing it for his sake. Meng Liang planned to continue persuading her, but he was even more depressed. If he was in Meng County in Tsang Prefecture, anyone would flatter him. He could even ask someone to kneel down and lick his toes. But who was Lu Shi? He dared to act pretentious in front of him. Meng Liang couldn't help but feel resentful. He blamed half of it on Lu Shi, who didn't know what was good for him, and the other half on the manservant who came up with ideas. When he got back, he would kick the manservant who came up with such ideas. Before Meng Liang could respond, Jiang Pengji added another sentence. How about this? If you really want to go out to play, why don't you change into a man's attire? That way, even if people see you, they won't say anything. Jiang Pengji suggested seriously, if I see someone I know, I can say that you're a new friend. How about that? She put on an expression that said, I'm doing this for your own good, and said reluctantly, I'm afraid you don't know that I just broke off my engagement with the Wei girl. If people see me taking you out to play, people might spread rumors that Lai Shi is a fickle man, and that's why he broke off his relationship with the Wei girl. If that's the case, Lai Shi's reputation will be in jeopardy. What else could Jiang Pengji do? She was helpless. The corner of Meng Liang's mouth twitched as if he had just heard some stupid suggestion. Let him cross-dress? To think that his cousin could think of this. However, this was also a compromise. From Lu Shi's point of view, it was indeed a win-win solution. Not only could she protect her cousin's reputation, but she could also prevent herself from being gossiped about. Moreover, she could also help her cousin relieve her boredom. However, even though the idea was good, it depended on whether Meng Liang would agree to it or not. Although Meng Liang was a jerk and had a muddle-headed brain, he wasn't completely dumb. The world was big, but life was the most important. What if he was discovered by Meng Han when he returned to his male attire? However, if he did not agree and missed this opportunity, it would not be easy to find a reason to drag Lu Shi out the next time. Jiang Pengji could tell that he was conflicted. She took the opportunity to remind him, I'm wrong. You're so beautiful. If you disguise as a man, you won't be able to hide your femininity. It doesn't make a difference if you disguise as a woman. It's getting late. If you don't have any other instructions, I'll ask my servant to send you back to your room. When it gets dark, you won't be able to see your own fingers. It won't be good if you fall. Meng Liang was suddenly enlightened. How could he be so stupid? It was so dark outside. If he returned to his male attire and put on some makeup, who would recognize him? That Meng Hun was just a lowly captain, a dog that followed his father around all the time. That pair of dog eyes had only glanced at him a few times. All he had to do was put on some makeup. How could that Meng Hun recognize him in the dark? It seemed that he was overthinking things. He was so nervous about being threatened by a lowly servant. Meng Liang's heart calmed down. He smiled and covered his mouth with his handkerchief. What's the rush, Cousin Lanting? I haven't been out much lately. I'm still in a daze after hearing your bold suggestion. Jiang Pengji smiled. Her tone was relaxed and a little indulgent. If that's the case, I'll wait in the courtyard for you to change into male attire. Remember to ask the maidservants by your side to put on some heroic makeup for you, so that others won't recognize you if you look too feminine. Meng Liang was still smiling when he heard the first part of Jiang Pengji's words. When she said the second part, he couldn't help but feel gloomy. If it wasn't for the fact that Lu Shi didn't know who he was, he would have suspected that Lu Shi was mocking him for being a sissy. Meng Liang suppressed the anger in his heart. He put on a smile and walked away gracefully. As a new personal servant, Nongqin walked him to the door. When Meng Liang was out of sight, there was still some fear in her big eyes. She secretly heaved a sigh of relief and hurried back. Lang Jun, before Nongqin could finish, Jiang Pengji was already leaning lazily on the table. She flipped a fan in her palm. Nongqin, go and prepare a new set of clothes for the manservant. Yes. Nongqin swallowed back the question she was about to ask. When she came back with the clothes, Jiang Pengji pointed at the clothes with the fan and said to Nongqin, you wear it. Nongqin was confused. She held the clothes and didn't know what to do. What? Go out with me tonight and watch the monkey show. Jiang Pengji smiled meaningfully. Nongqin held the clothes and looked at her Lang Jun, blushing slightly. Because she was a personal servant, Nongqin had the right to know a secret. Her Lang Jun was a girl. When she first found out, she was stunned. But, even though she knew her Lang Jun was a girl, Nongqin still looked at him in a daze. In her eyes, there were thousands of men in the world, but none of them could be as charming as her Lang Jun. Just like that smile just now, it was actually somewhat sinister and awe-inspiring, bewitching to the point of not wanting it. Nongqin put on the manservant's clothes. The clothes were a bit loose. She wrapped layers of cloth in front of her chest to cover her features. She put on a layer of dark powder and trimmed her eyebrows. From afar, she looked like a delicate and pretty boy. Fortunately, I didn't pierce my ears. Otherwise, would have been exposed. Jiang Pengji glanced at Nongqin and was slightly satisfied. She took Nongqin out to watch the show, not because she favored her, but because she was the only one who didn't have pierced ears. She wanted to take Su Ku out, but he was still in the farm, so she didn't want to. Nongqin was stunned when she saw Jiang Pengji was about to go out empty-handed. Lang Jun, please wait. I'll go prepare some silver. How could she go shopping without money? She snorted. Prepare what? Someone will pay for it. If everything goes well tonight, I might be able to save a betrothal gift for you. Nongqin was confused again. Chapter 158. That being said, Jiang Pengji didn't really bring nothing. At least she brought 10 taels of silver. For an ordinary family, it was a luxury to bring 10 taels of silver with them. They had to be careful of pickpockets. Jiang Pengji felt that it was enough. But for Meng Liang, who was used to being extravagant, 10 taels of silver was not enough for him. Dongqing was different from the other 4 countries. There was no curfew at night, but the city gates would be closed at night. The night market was bustling with people. Vendors were hawking their wares. Most of them were intricately woven goods or trinkets. Silk and floral jewelry filled the stalls. The materials used were cheap and simple, but the craftsmanship was exquisite. It was obvious that a lot of thought had been put into it. It was a prosperous scene. Even though it was already night, there were still a few young girls wearing bamboo hats in the night market. Their faces could not be seen, but their slender and graceful backs were enough to make some people lose their ability to walk. Jiang Pengji secretly glanced at them and teased, "Cousin, you're more manly than she." He saw 2 young ladies with graceful figures, their eyes almost glued to the other party's body. No matter how beautiful they are, how can they compare to your beauty? Meng Liang was enjoying the show, so it was not hard to imagine how unhappy he was to be interrupted. Although he had always been proud of his looks, there were always people who said he was a woman. It was a way of mocking him for not being a man. Now that Jiang Pengji had emphasized this point. If it wasn't for the fact that he wasn't in Meng County, he would have slapped her. Do you know how to speak? However, Meng Liang was still rational. He did not put his thoughts into action. Instead, he clenched his fists and put on a fake smile. Lanting, you should call me cousin when we're outside. Otherwise, what would happen if someone heard us? What's more, everyone loves beauty. Seeing a beautiful young lady, why can't you let your cousin take a good look? Jiang Pengji replied with an "oh," but she sneered in her heart. Calling him cousin? TSK, he really doesn't want to die fast enough. She turned her face away with slight disgust, but she called him cousin sweetly. Meng Liang was happy to hear that. Jiang Pengji stopped in front of a stall and asked the vendor, "How much are these silk flowers?" She picked up the pair of ball-shaped silk flowers that she had taken a fancy to. They were made of rabbit fur and dyed bright colors. They looked very pretty. There were also many ball-shaped silk flowers of different colors hanging on the stall. The materials used were not exquisite, but they were novel. Cousin Lanting, are you kidding me? How can a man like these things? Meng Liang took the opportunity to retaliate. Jiang Pengji said casually, I think they look good. I'll buy a few pairs for the maids in the yard. Girls love beauty. Rouge, face powder, silk ornaments, clothes, hair. No amount of money is enough. Nongqin, try this. The color is just right. Nongqin blushed and took it. She could still feel the warmth of the man on the ball-shaped silk flower. Thank you, Lang Jun. I forgot. It's not suitable for you to wear it in your current state. Let's go back and try it on. Nongqin, who was about to put it on, suddenly froze and blushed. She seemed to have forgotten that she was dressed as a manservant. Why would she try on silk flowers? Meng Liang, who was standing to the side, clicked his tongue and said, Cousin Lanting, are these cheap gifts for girls? It's not like a personal maid is anything else. If she wears gold and silver, what will she look like? Jiang Pengji picked a few pairs that she felt were of good workmanship. She also bought a few rouge boxes and some fresh-colored lip gloss to protect her lips and not be eye-catching. Moreover, girls at this age are already the most beautiful. Why would they need those old-fashioned and expensive accessories? They would forcefully suppress their aura. Jiang Pengji picked out a lot of miscellaneous items and prepared a set for each of her maids. She didn't give more or less for anyone. She could be patient and buy these small, cheap gifts, but Meng Liang was not in the mood. She wanted to take a roundabout way to lure Lu Shi into the gambling house. Obedient children like him who stayed in the yard were easily attracted by new things. If she brought him here a few times, he would definitely become addicted to gambling. In order to keep the secret, he would have to get close to her. That way, she could achieve her goal of getting close to Lu Shi and destroy him secretly. TSK, he wanted to see how big Lu Shi's family business was for his ignorant son to squander it. But now, looking at Lu Shi's sissy buying this and that, who knew when he would achieve his goal? Cousin, why do you want to go to that kind of place? Jiang Pengji frowned and denied it. I'm not going. It's a messy place. What if someone offends you? Cousin, you should go somewhere else. I heard that it's dirty. Jiang Pengji's naive words made Meng Liang laugh in his heart. Cousin Lanting, why are you so nervous? In the past, I heard from the servants that many nobles like to go there as well. Since everyone likes to go, it shouldn't be as bad as you say. I'm just curious and want to see it. Cousin, please allow me. I'm not nervous. I'm just worried that a rough person will offend you. If something happens, how will I explain it to my mother? Jiang Pengji rejected him with righteous words and put on an attitude that said there was no room for negotiation. But was Meng Liang the kind of person who would give up so easily? In the end, Jiang Pengji couldn't handle Meng Liang's aggression. She reluctantly said that she would bring him there to have a look and that he would come out after seeing it. Nongqin was anxious, but she could not say anything to stop him. She could not say that Meng Liang was up to no good. With such anxiety in her heart, Nongqin watched her Langjun enter a gambling house. When the curtain was lifted, the gambling house was filled with people. Many shirtless men were standing on long benches and shouting around a table. Big! 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 Small! Small! It must be small. Nongqin couldn't help but tremble when she heard all the similar noises. It's okay. I'm here. At that moment, Jiang Pengji put a hand on her shoulder and turned around to smile at her. Strangely, Nongqin's fear disappeared and she gradually calmed down. The gambling house was big. There were more than 10 tables on the first floor, and each table was surrounded by more than 10 to 20 men. When the waiter in the lobby saw them, his eyes suddenly lit up. Young age, tender face, gorgeous clothes. When these characteristics were put together, they formed a shiny label. Fat sheep. What would you like to play? The waiter came forward with a face full of smiles, revealing a mouthful of shiny yellow teeth. Chapter 159. The waiter chuckled and said, "There are many fun things to do here. If you are interested, I can tell you about them." Then tell me about them. I'm listening. Meng Liang said that, but deep down, he was feeling proud of himself. Okay, listen up. Single and even dice flips, 4 directions treasure stalls, big and small pig nests, chicken fights, duck fights, quail fights. As if he was reciting the names of dishes, he recited more than a dozen different games without taking a breath, and even shouted at the end. I'm not playing. Jiang Pengji interrupted him and turned to leave. The waiter was dumbfounded. The voice of the name list stopped abruptly. He didn't even have the time to stop her. But since she was already at the gambling house, how could Meng Liang let her leave without playing? Cousin Lanting, since you're already here, why don't you play a few rounds before you leave? Besides, there's nothing fun outside. Meng Liang's face was full of smiles. He placed his hand on Jiang Pengji's shoulder and coaxed her to go back. Jiang Pengji frowned impatiently and said righteously, "Cousin, you said that you're just here to take a look. Why are you playing now? Gamblers don't have connections. This doesn't sound good. Cousin, don't be too curious." Meng Liang rolled his eyes. She was good at preaching, but she was just a fool who didn't know how to have fun. He let go of her shoulder and pouted. "Cousin Lanting, you want to leave, but I don't want to. Meng Liang decided to play the blame game. He was sure that Jiang Pengji wouldn't dare to leave a weak girl like him in a gambling house. In the end, Jiang Pengji had to stay, which made Meng Liang feel a sense of accomplishment. Although the waiter wanted to take advantage of a fat sheep, he was not blind. He quietly waited for them to come to a conclusion. Although he looked sincere on the surface, he had already begun to roll his eyes in his heart. What kind of place was a gambling house? It was a place that could make people rich, but it could also make them bankrupt. It was a place where they could sell their children and become a pimp. Even the god of fortune would be skinned alive if he came, let alone 3 naive kids who had never seen the world. There was a saying that went, the one who enters is the boss, and the one who loses is the boss. The waiter only needed to coax the 3 of them in, and someone would suck them dry. Meng Liang curiously approached one of the tables. What are they playing? Those gamblers had just finished a round and were so excited that their brains were heating up. Those who had won were so excited that they were sweating profusely, while those who had lost looked like they were unlucky. There were even some who had lost too badly and were now in a daze, looking as if they had suffered a great blow and could no longer live. The waiter said, "This table is playing big or small. There are 3 dice in the dice cup, and after you shake them, you can choose big or small." The rules were simple and straightforward. Even people who had never played before could learn it quickly. Jiang Pengji glanced coldly at the gambling cup in the dealer's hand. At that moment, the lid of the gambling cup was not closed. She could see the 3 dusty dice. She raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Isn't it simple to bet on big or small?" The waiter smiled. "It is indeed simple and easy to earn. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many people playing." Many gamblers thought that a 50% chance of winning was too much. That was why they took the first step, and then they were cheated. Of the 3 dice, 4 to 10 were small, and 11 to 17 were big. If the dice were 3 or 18, which meant that all 3 dice were 1 or 6, then the banker would take it all. Betting on big or small would lose, and the odds were 1 to 1. How dare they play such a childish game in front of her? "Cousin Lanting, what do you choose?" Seeing that a new round of bets was about to begin, the dealer had already finished shaking the dice and was about to place his bet. Jiang Pengji pretended to be righteous and refused to play, but Meng Liang was very confident in his charm. He acted coquettishly and succeeded in making Lanting's cousin take the first step. One of them chose big, while the other chose small. The results were delightful. The tail Jiang Pengji had left behind was taken by Meng Liang. "You've played. Can you leave now, cousin?" Jiang Pengji said unhappily. "What do you mean you've played? One tail is one tail. Cousin Lanting, are you really willing to let your money fall into someone else's pocket? If you don't want to play, I'll play. Cousin Lanting isn't short of money. Money can't buy my happiness. As long as I have fun, I don't care about anything else." Meng Liang refused to leave. He played another 2 rounds and won both rounds. Many gamblers were cheering. Jiang Pengji looked cold, but deep down, she was tempted. Meng Liang immediately fanned the flames. "It's boring to stand around. Why don't you play with your cousin for a while?" Jiang Pengji used Meng Liang as an excuse. But was she playing along with him or did she want to play? Meng Liang's eyes saw through the truth. Compared to Meng Liang's winning streak, Jiang Pengji was unlucky. She lost 5 times in a row and lost 5 taels of silver. Nongqin watched anxiously. What kind of people were there in the gambling house? You were the boss when you were rich, but you were worse off than your grandson when you lost money. Don't worry. My luck has always been good. Jiang Pengji played with the last tael of silver and smiled meaningfully. Others would win or lose based on luck, but Jiang Pengji purely depended on her willingness to win. Meng Liang saw that Jiang Pengji was starting to get into the groove. He smiled to himself and took his winnings to another table. "Do you still want to play, Lang Jun?" the dealer asked. "Of course." Jiang Pengji threw the last tael of silver to small. "Open." Jiang Pengji, who had lost 5 rounds in a row, suddenly won. Her bet was small. The odds were 1 to 1. Now she had 2 taels of silver in her hands. She placed the 2 taels on the small table. The dealer smiled. "You still want to bet small?" Because of the 8 rounds of small, many people placed their bets on big. Only Jiang Pengji still chose small. "Yes." The dealer took off the cover of the dice cup. 1, 3, 4, 8 points, small. She had 4 taels of silver in her hands. "I'll bet big this round." Jiang Pengji still placed all her taels of silver. The dealer took off the cover of the dice cup. 4, 4, 5, 13 points, big. She had 8 taels of silver in her hands. Again, big. She had 16 taels of silver in her hands. The dealer's expression was a little stiff. He smiled and said, "You're really lucky." Jiang Pengji was surprised. Was that considered lucky? She was afraid of herself when she gambled. She didn't know that more than a dozen casinos in the federal black market had closed down because of her occasional visits. Her identity was special. Even when she lost so much money in the black market casinos, no one dared to do anything to her. Chapter 160. From losing to winning, Jiang Pengji quickly won 256 taels of silver. Nongqin's eyes were wide open as she watched her win. How long had it been? She went from 1 tael to 256 taels. The dealer's palms were sweating. He secretly wiped his sweat and pretended to be calm. 256 taels of silver was a huge sum of money for a small or medium-sized casino. "Do you still want to bet this round?" Jiang Pengji looked down and said, "I wanted to pick the small one, but I won't bet for this round." Nongqin was confused. Her Lang Jun wanted to pick the small one. Why didn't he bet? The gamblers didn't have the same idea. They all bet on the small one with the intention of making a profit. However, Jiang Pengji knew very well that the dealer would take all in this round. Big or small was not allowed. Sure enough, it was a rare 3 sixes, a leopard. Although the dealer took all in, the dealer couldn't laugh because Jiang Pengji still won the next 2 rounds. It meant that Jiang Pengji only lost 5 taels, but she won 10-24 taels in the end. The dealer couldn't sit still anymore. He felt uncomfortable as if there were countless needles poking him under his butt. He found an excuse to say that he was going to the gambling house, but in fact, he went to the 2nd floor to look for the boss. According to Jiang Pengji's previous rules, the gambling house would be finished if she won another 2 or 3 rounds. The profits of the next few years would be gone. In a place like a gambling house, there were all kinds of shady methods. Otherwise, how could people lose all their money and eventually sell their children, and even use their wives to pay off the debt, letting them sell themselves to the brothel to pay off the debt? They made money from blackmail. What seemed like a fair game was actually a shady business. In the simplest form of gambling on size, every die was specially made. The seemingly ordinary die had a weight bias, and the dealer relied on his skillful technique and keen sense of touch to greatly control the sum of the number of dice that came out of each round. Gambling dens of a larger scale could even change the number of dice at 0 after the gamblers placed their bets, turning big into small. That was why there were so many losers and so few winners, even though the odds of winning were 50-50. Even if someone won, they would quickly lose back. These were the tricks of the gambling house. If they encountered a fat sheep, they would usually let the fat sheep earn a few rounds. Then, when the other party's bets got bigger and bigger, they would slightly turn the tables. The banker and the gamblers would say something like, "Victory or defeat depends on luck. If you're unlucky this time, you'll definitely turn around the next time." This would stimulate the fat sheep's nerves and make them continue to increase their bets by a huge amount. The casino owner couldn't sit still when he heard that. The boss asked him, "Didn't you do anything?" The dealer had an aggrieved look on his face. "I did, but that kid was so slippery. It was as if he already knew that I was going to attack, and he always managed to avoid me. I can't possibly use leopard in every round, right? If I do that, the others will also notice that something is wrong." The boss was also burning with anxiety. He was the one who owned the gambling house. Jiang Pengji's earning money was like digging meat out of him. If it really doesn't work, then let him win. When the time comes. The boss made a chopping motion with his hand. What kind of rotten things had they not done in this line of work? Blocking someone's money was like killing their parents. Jiang Pengji had earned so much money from him that her hatred had escalated to the level of killing her parents. The dealer was shocked. He was quite tempted, but he added with some difficulty, "I'm afraid that won't work. I'm afraid that won't work. Judging from the attire of those brats, they don't seem to be from an ordinary family." In Hejin County, gentry families were as numerous as the hairs on a cow. If they were not ordinary people, they could be the sons of gentry families if they were dressed differently. How could they afford to offend a small gambling house? The boss was so angry that he stomped his feet. "Then what do you think we should do?" The dealer thought for a while and suddenly had an idea. He said, "I remember now. That kid has an accomplice who is also playing at the other table. Although he's not bad, he doesn't have that evil winning streak. Should we kill the other one?" Jiang Pengji was evil, but the other older boy was very ordinary. They could use him as an example. However much the evil brat won here, they could make the ordinary one lose the same amount, or even more. This idea seemed to be very good. The boss and the dealer looked at each other, and they both saw the satisfaction in each other's eyes. That was a brilliant idea. Jiang Pengji looked at the dealer coldly. She closed her eyes slightly, knowing that the big fish had taken the bait. How dare they scheme against her? She would definitely let them know what it meant to lose everything in one's pants. "Let's continue," Jiang Pengji said leisurely with a slight smile on her face. That look made the dealer's heart tremble. He almost dropped the dice cup with his hand that was shaking the dice. It was not because Jiang Pengji's smile was beautiful, but because of his sharp intuition from living in the marketplace. He felt threatened. The group of gamblers was excited to watch the show. After all, they lost more than they won, and they were excited to win some occasionally. Now they saw someone really winning streak, and the bet had reached more than 4,000 taels of silver. Looking at the rows of gold in front of Jiang Pengji, everyone felt like they were going blind. If the gold was exchanged for the equivalent of more than 4,000 taels of silver, they would not even be able to transport it home. The dealer calmed himself down and asked with a smile, "Young Lang Jun, do you want to continue betting?" Jiang Pengji suddenly smiled, and what she said made the dealer choke. "No. It's not challenging. It's boring." She pretended to stand up, and Nongqin, who was behind her, immediately walked up to the table and wrapped the gold in her arms. Nongqin's arms were heavy, and she was still dizzy. She felt very unreal. The dealer panicked and wanted to persuade her to stay, but when he heard the sound of Meng Liang slamming the table, he immediately calmed down. It was okay. If one table was won, wouldn't the other table lose as well? Jiang Pengji seemed to have only just realized that Meng Liang had gone to another table. "Cousin?" Jiang Pengji brought Nongqin over. Meng Liang's eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like he had lost his mind. "Get out of my way!" Meng Liang turned around and shouted. He pointed at the dealer and said, "Continue betting." Jiang Pengji was not angry. Instead, she asked the gambler beside her, "Cousin, what is he?" The gambler answered with a smile. He could not hide the gloating in his tone. "You better stop your cousin. He has already lost more than 6,000 taels of silver." More than 6,000 taels of silver? Jiang Pengji was speechless. Wasn't this too much? This table was filled with odd and even players. It was bigger than the previous table, and on the surface, it looked more fair. But when Jiang Pengji glanced at the dice cup, she immediately knew why Meng Liang had lost so badly. Chapter 161. Jiang Pengji stopped talking after being yelled at. She looked at Meng Liang coldly as he continued to court death. Everyone in Meng County fawned over him. Even in a gambling house, the boss would treat him well. That was why he won a lot of money every time he went there. As time went by, Meng Liang had the illusion that he was the king of the gambling table. Now he was in trouble. This was Hejian County, not Meng County, Tsang Prefecture. Not everyone was fawning over him. Nongqin held the gold in her arms tightly. Her face turned pale when she heard the number. Lang Jun, if they continued to lose, she and her Lang Jun would not be able to leave. Who asked the three of them to come together? It's a trap. There's no hurry. Jiang Pengji sneered. How could she not know what the gambling house was planning? Or rather, it was the result of her deliberate manipulation. But what was the connection between Meng Liang's losing and her winning? Meng Liang was the legitimate son of the Mengs. He had the best food and clothes. Plus, his real mother was Meng Zhan's concubine. She was secretly in charge of the inner house. What could he not have? The amount of money he made every month was terrifying. On the gambling table, the smallest bet was in the hundreds. Sometimes, when he played big, it was possible to bet more than 1,000. However, no one dared to win against him. Even if they did, it would be pointless. Meng Liang would just bring his servants to his doorstep. He was a jinx. This time, he bet another 1,000 taels of silver. Jiang Pengji smiled coldly, but the dealer smiled like a fox. Lang Jun, you've already bet a few thousand taels. We're a small business. If you can't pay us back after gambling, we'll lose a lot. The dealer played hard to get. It seemed like he did not want Meng Liang to continue gambling, but his words hinted at something else. Meng Liang almost laughed. How could he not have the money? Who did he think he was? Why are you talking so much nonsense? You're just a snob. Do you think I'll lose out on such a small amount of silver? He slammed the table. If it were not for his expensive clothes and good looks, he would look like a gangster. After being scolded, the dealer didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and shrugged. Of course. I can tell that you have an extraordinary background when I look at you, but how can that compare to real gold and silver? We haven't even seen a single strand of silver here. If you win, we'll have to give you real silver. Meng Liang was so angry that he wanted to tear this person's mouth apart. If he was still in Meng County, who would dare to treat him like this? What a snob. But as angry as he was, Meng Liang did not have any money with him. Thinking about this, he became even angrier. When the dealer saw that Meng Liang still hadn't taken out the money, he couldn't help but snort coldly. If you don't have money, you pretend to be rich and come here to gamble. This was a gambling den, not a charity hall. It was only right and proper to pay one's debts. Hurry up and return the money. Get lost. If you don't have money, just say it. Don't be unreasonable with me. After saying that, a few strong men dressed in coarse hemp clothes surrounded him. At that moment, Meng Liang was already irritated by the dealer's words. The frustration from his previous consecutive losses had been squeezed to the limit. Now, he was being mocked by an ant that he had never looked down upon. How could the proud and spoiled Meng Liang tolerate this? How dare an ant that he had killed so casually treat him like this? They must be tired of living. Meng Liang was not someone who could tolerate easily. At that moment, Jiang Pengji guessed that the time was right. She stepped forward to stop him, but it was actually adding fuel to the fire. She seemed to be in a difficult position. She said with a hint of charity, "Cousin, don't bother with these commoners. I still have some silver here." Meng Liang's eyes were red. He glared at her as if she was his murderer and pushed her away. "Do you know who I am? Lowly commoner, I dare you to touch a single hair on my head." Meng Liang had been provoked in many ways. His eyes were filled with anger. How could he still be rational? Hearing his arrogant words, the dealer snorted coldly and mocked him. "I don't care if you are a dragon or a tiger. Since you are here, you must follow the rules. How dare you be rude when you don't have the money?" Meng Liang shouted at the thugs who were trying to surround him. "Get out of my way, lowly commoner. I am the descendant of Lord Meng. How dare you touch me?" Meng Liang raised his hand and swatted away one of the thug's hands. His snow-white face was already flushed with anger. It was no wonder he was furious to be treated like that by a lowly commoner. "Meng Zhan is my father." "Fine." Jiang Pengji, who was watching from the side, curled her lips into a smile. Meng Liang had finally said the two most important words. "Who is Meng Zhan? I have never heard of him." The dealer sneered and pointed at Meng Liang's nose. "How dare you call yourself the descendant of Lord Meng? Will Lord Meng's descendant be like you? You can't even afford to gamble. How dare you call yourself the descendant of Lord Meng? Arrest him." Nongqin's face turned pale. The thugs not only wanted to detain Meng Liang, but also her and her Lang Jun. Clang! Before Nongqin could come to her senses, one of the thugs who had reached out to her suddenly flew out as if he had been hit by a heavy punch. He hit a nearby gambling table and the betting money fell to the ground with a crisp sound. This turn of events scared everyone so much that they didn't come back to their senses. What happened? Jiang Pengji retracted her foot and smiled wickedly. "Don't. My servant is young and timid. Don't bully him." That kick was from her. It was so fast that no one could react. "What are you waiting for? Let's go." Jiang Pengji took out a long fan from her sleeve and slapped one of the thugs in the face. His face was bleeding, and it hurt to look at. Meng Liang seemed to have just regained his composure, but he was not willing to run away like that. "You unruly commoners! If you dare to fight again, I will ask the Meng army to chop you into human jerky." Everyone was confused by Jiang Pengji's sudden attack, but Meng Liang, their stupid teammate, kept provoking their anger. They were so angry that they couldn't care less if the three were the sons of the gentry. They just wanted to lock them up and talk about their next course of action. Jiang Pengji was at ease. Even though Nongqin was dragging her down, she could still walk as if she was taking a stroll in the park. However, due to her costume, she could not move her lower body too much. She had to rely on the strength of her hands. Jiang Pengji, who had undergone special training, knew the structure of the human body better than she did. She could easily dislocate the joints of the opponents. The gamblers on the first floor saw that something was wrong. They immediately stuffed the betting money into their pockets and planned to sneak away while the situation was still chaotic. The other gamblers had the same idea, and the scene became even more chaotic. Jiang Pengji protected Nongqin, but she was not as nice to Meng Liang. Meng Liang was so frightened by the scene that he came back to his senses. His cheeks were pale, and he looked like a mess. Chapter 162. She said, "This won't do. I'm afraid none of us will be able to escape. I'll distract some of them. Take care, cousin." Meng Liang was furious as he ran. "I think you're using me as bait, aren't you?" Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "Cousin Meng Liang has been stupid for so long. I didn't expect him to be smart for once before he died." "What?" Meng Liang was shocked. The three of them had run into a dark alley, and there was a pungent smell in the air. Just as he realized something was wrong, Jiang Pengji raised her hand and hit the back of his neck. Along with the pain, Meng Liang's vision was instantly shrouded in darkness. His consciousness quickly became hazy. Before he completely lost consciousness, he vaguely felt a sharp pain in his throat. His body involuntarily twitched twice. Nongqin was shocked speechless, but the person who hit him did not seem to be scared. "Lang Jun, don't worry about him." Nongqin saw Jiang Pengji throw the unconscious Meng Liang on the ground like a piece of trash, and she was at a loss of what to do. Even though she did not like Meng Liang, he was still an important guest. If anything happened to him, there would be trouble. Who cares? Let's just run. Hold on to the gold in your arms. 10% of it will be your betrothal gift for your future husband. What? Nongqin was confused. Jiang Pengji smiled indifferently. She was annoyed that Nongqin was running too slowly, so she simply grabbed her hand and carried her up. Nongqin was screaming in surprise. Jiang Pengji put one hand on her shoulder and the other on her calf. Even though Nongqin was not fat, she still weighed more than 90 kilograms. She leaped onto the wall of the alley, and with a few leaps, Jiang Pengji jumped into the deep alley nearby. Done. Jiang Pengji put down Nongqin, who was still in a daze. There was a hint of laughter in her voice, as if she had let go of all the pent-up frustration in her heart. She had planned to tease Meng Liang a little longer, but now? Hee, she changed her mind at the last minute. When Nongqin landed on the ground, she finally recovered from the dizzy state. She tilted her head and took a closer look. She could faintly see the outline of her Langjuan's face in the dark. He had run for a long distance with her in his arms, but his forehead was still fresh and his breathing was steady. Nongqin felt a little ashamed in her heart. She had been doing rough work since she was a child. She could eat a lot and was strong, but she could not compare with her pampered Langjun. Langjun. Will Madam blame you for leaving Miss Biao behind? If he spouts any nonsense, the gamblers will come to the Lu mansion. Then. Nongqin's face turned pale. Jiang Pengji snorted coldly. Isn't our Lady Biao by my side? As for whether or not Meng Liang will talk nonsense, don't worry, he can't speak or write for the time being. Be a good boy and wait at the gambling house. She had many tricks up her sleeves. She could temporarily paralyze a person's arm or make them unable to speak or write. It was very simple. How could Meng Liang compete with her? She could toy with that brat to death even with her eyes closed. Right by her side? Nongqin could not help but look around. There were only the two of them. Where was the third person? Was there a third person? Suddenly, she felt the air around her was a little cold. A creepy feeling rushed from the soles of her feet to her brain. Let's go buy some women's clothing. You can wear it and temporarily play the role of Lady Biao, Jiang Pengji said. Nongqin finally realized what Jiang Pengji meant. She wanted her to pretend to be Lady Biao? But won't my identity be exposed? Many people have already seen the appearance of young Miss Cousin. Nongqin felt it was tricky, but it was her Langjuan's request. She had to comply. However, it seemed that even the heavens were against Jiang Pengji. Just when she felt a little better, the system beeped. System, beginning self-examination. Scanning mission. Beep. Scan successful. Mission established. Meng Liang, son of Meng Zhan, chief of Meng County in Tsang Prefecture, is in danger. Please save him in 2 hours. When the mission is completed, the host will receive the reward of Willow Slender Waist. If the mission fails, the host will receive a level 5 electric shock as punishment. Jiang Pengji's face froze, and then a bloodthirsty smile appeared on her face. System, are you asking for a beating? The system explained frantically, its voice sounding panicked and helpless. No, host. Listen to me. After the real-time mission is loaded, it will be automatically assigned to the host based on what you encounter. It will be automatically assigned. But you have to believe that completing the mission will only benefit you. This is carefully calculated, and it will not harm the host's interests. I've looked at the back-end data. Killing Meng Liang will cause you great losses. What are you talking about? If you can understand me, then shut up. Jiang Pengji was furious. She was already annoyed by the system, and now she felt even more disgusted. The system lost its temper when Jiang Pengji yelled at it. Host, although I am your system, I hope you can respect me. We need to support each other, not drag each other down. The calculation of the human brain will never be as good as the optical computer system. After analysis, we concluded that saving Meng Liang is the best choice. Jiang Pengji snorted. I said, shut up. The system was frustrated by her stubbornness, but there was nothing it could do. If you don't carry out the mission, you will receive a 2-hour countdown. When the time is up, you will automatically fail the mission. Do you understand? If you fail the mission, you will be punished with a level 5 electric shock. That will cost you your life. Then I'll just die. Jiang Pengji's words pushed back the system's attempts to dissuade her. At that moment, Meng Liang, who had fainted on the ground, was captured and tied up. Have you found the other two? The one who won a lot of money ran away, while the one who lost to the casino and owed a lot of money was caught. What was going on? The owner of the casino was so angry that his face contorted into a dark purple hue. The few hired thugs of the gambling house were trembling with fear like quails. They had already tried their best to chase after them, but not only were the two slippery fellows slippery, they seemed to have vanished into thin air without a trace. Not to mention people, they didn't even catch a single strand of hair. They really couldn't understand. That alley was clearly a dead end, so how did the two of them escape? Chapter 163. The thug was furious, but he didn't dare to say anything. The casino had been making dirty money in Hejian County for years. He was the one who manipulated the gamblers and forced many families to separate. How many gamblers lost their fortune and lost their composure? How many wives and daughters of the gamblers were sold into prostitution? It could be said that the establishment and operation of the casino were built with the blood and tears of the gamblers' families. Every coin and every cent was stained with blood. It was not clean at all. Unexpectedly, the boss of the casino was blinded by the eagle's peck. He was tricked by a young boy. That was more than 4,000 taels of silver. Ordinary people couldn't make that much money in a few lifetimes. In the face of the furious boss, there was finally a bold person who bit the bullet and asked. Boss. What should we do with the one who got caught? Lock him up in the woodshed. Do you want him to be treated like the god of fortune? The boss was so angry that he wanted to stomp on Meng Liang's head, but he restrained himself. Somewhere else, Jiang Pengji took Nongqin to buy a set of women's clothing. Then she put on a thick bamboo hat to cover her face. Lang Jun, is this okay? Nongqin had never worn such fine clothes in her life. She was so excited that she didn't know what to say. She blushed and lowered her head. She didn't dare to look up at others. It's a little short, but it's the only ready-made clothes that fit. It's okay. In ancient times, there was no such thing as a ready-made clothing store. Most families would have their women go out to the streets to buy suitable materials and sew them into clothes. Some families would even grow their own raw materials and slowly turn them into cloth. After dyeing them, they would then make clothes. Even so, there were some places where ready-made clothes could be bought, such as the large-scale cloth stores. The cloth stores sold cloth, but they could also customize the clothes. Sometimes, in order to give customers a more intuitive introduction, they would make some ready-made clothes and display them in the shop. The clothes could also be sold, but that was not the main business of the cloth store. Jiang Pengji took Nongqin around the clothing store and bought a set of fine, high-quality clothes that fit her figure. He asked Nongqin to put on the bamboo hat and bought 2 bolts of good material for inner clothes for Xuanmei Takshu. Jiang Pengji didn't want to be special. Nongqin bought the clothes because of special circumstances, not because she was biased. But for the sake of fairness, she couldn't ignore the other 2 maids in the yard. If he gave them other materials, even if they were made into clothes, they wouldn't be able to wear them. It would be better to buy the material used to make undergarments, which would be more comfortable to wear. Let's go. Jiang Pengji said. Nongqin nodded and pulled the white veil over the bamboo hat to prevent her face from being exposed. The system trembled as it spoke. Host. Are you really not going to consider it? Jiang Pengji had calmed down from her previous anger. She asked seriously, can you uninstall the real-time mission board after it's loaded? Don't give me these messy tasks, because even if you give them to me, I won't do them. The system said bitterly, I'm sorry, host. The loading board can only be uninstalled after the next major upgrade. In other words, before you level up for the second time, will these quests continue to be issued out of nowhere? The system carefully looked at her face to make sure she didn't have any intention of scolding her. Then, it spoke shakily. Not constantly. According to the manual of the board, the real-time missions are issued in a regular pattern. For example, if the host encounters something important, the board will calculate the best outcome and route, and then issue the mission. The host will receive a certain reward after completing the mission. If the host doesn't complete the mission or fails the mission, the reward will be exchanged for the corresponding energy value as a punishment. Jiang Pengji was silent for a while. When the system thought she was ignoring it, she asked a question. System, tell me clearly once again, what kind of system are you? I want to know your full name. The system was puzzled. That question was nonsense, wasn't it? But considering the host's temperament, it felt that if it didn't answer, it would probably be scolded again. So, it honestly said, the full name is, Multidimensional Palace Intrigue Streaming System. Yes, you're the Multidimensional Palace Intrigue Streaming System. The loading of the real-time mission board is also to serve the main plot. This can be seen from the mission reward, Willow Slender Waist, slender and enchanting. Hee. Is that useful? Of course, men like slender waists, and having a willow slender waist can indeed make men linger on you for a second longer, but... Jiang Pengji's voice was very calm, but it was this calmness that made the system's scalp tingle. I want to kill all my enemies and become the emperor, not sleep with all the men and let them help me ascend the throne. Becoming the emperor and becoming the emperor's woman, how could the two be the same? So, now, system, you can shut up. The system didn't dare to make a sound. Jiang Pengji didn't have such a strong desire to cause trouble in the beginning. It was completely forced by the stupid system and the culture of this even more stupid era. She didn't want to be changed, so she could only think of ways to change others. As for the 5th level electric shock punishment that the system mentioned? Did it really think that the Federation's training methods were child's play? 90% of the so-called 5th level electric shock punishment was a threat. She knew what the other 10% was. Because she knew it, she was not afraid. It was still the same thing. Playing tricks with her? She could play with it with her eyes closed. Intelligence was a real weakness, and it couldn't be changed by leveling up. But a 5th-level electric shock punishment? Jiang Pengji's eyes flickered, and the corners of her lips curled up. This was a good opportunity. There were many training courses for genetic warriors, but the core of it was to stimulate the muscles with external force. The system's punishment couldn't really use electricity. After all, the human body was different. It was most likely to use some kind of energy to stimulate the nerves and muscles of the body to achieve the same punishment as a 5th-level electric shock. If that was the case, it would be a good training opportunity. Jiang Pengji brought Nongqin back to the Lus and sent her to the outer courtyard where Meng Liang lived. Stay here for a few days. You can go back to normal after the storm blows over. Nongqin nodded. At that moment, there was a voice coming closer. Lang Jun, you're finally back. If you didn't come back, I would have gone out to look for you. The person stopped abruptly and stared at Nongqin and Jiang Pengji. It was Meng Liang's servant who thought that his Lang Jun was back. Seeing the servant running over, Jiang Pengji suddenly smiled. Chapter 164. Meng Liang's servant was smarter than his master. Or rather, he was more perceptive. He could feel that danger was approaching. He was like a croaking frog that had been targeted by a poisonous snake. His life and death could be decided in an instant. The manservant tried his best to suppress the creepy feeling. He stopped in his tracks and bowed to Jiang Pengji. He bit the bullet and asked, "Do you know where my wife is?" Jiang Pengji laughed softly. Her mellow voice was different from that of a young man. It sounded more like it came from her throat. It sounded mellow. She said darkly, "Do you want to know where your Lang Jun went? If you're so curious, why don't you go to hell and ask him?" After the manservant heard this, he instantly shivered. His hands and feet turned cold, and the fear in his heart exploded in an instant. He was so scared that his legs went soft, and he directly knelt down in front of her feet. His knees happened to press on a few protruding stones, and immediately a bruise appeared. His thin lips trembled. He couldn't say a word. After a long time, he took a deep breath. He said dryly, "Please don't joke around. My wife was fine." As he spoke, he slowly got up and secretly took a few steps back. The grudge between the Lus and the Mengs was irreconcilable. It was not impossible for Lu Shi to kill someone. The manservant was so anxious that his eyes turned red. "Why would I joke around? Since the villain dies because he talks too much, I'll let you die with regrets." Jiang Pengji took a step forward. The manservant froze. He quickly turned around and tried to run into the house. Nongqin was anxious. She wanted to catch the manservant when she saw him trying to escape. But someone was faster than her. As if there was a gust of black wind, Jiang Pengji had already caught up with the servant who was trying to escape. She pinched the servant's slender neck with one hand and gradually exerted force with her 5 fingers. The servant felt that it was getting more and more difficult for him to breathe. He tried his best to pry her hand away with both of his hands. His feet rubbed against the ground. At first, he struggled intensely, but as time went by, the intensity gradually decreased. His legs, which were rubbing against the ground, went completely limp. His hands were still holding onto Jiang Pengji's wrists. His eyes were wide open, bulging so much that it seemed like they were about to jump out of their sockets and explode in the next second. His face had slowly turned from dark purple to green. Nongqin saw the servant struggling hard before he died. His eyes were almost popping out of his eye sockets. She was so nervous that her breath quickened. She felt like she had fallen into an ice cellar, as if the night wind around her was strangely cold. "Are you scared?" Nongqin stood rooted to the ground and heard Jiang Pengji's gentle question. She took a deep breath, and the trembling in her chest calmed down under the stimulation of the cold air. She bit the tip of her tongue and regained her senses. Her eyes were shining with determination. "Lang Jun, I'm afraid now, but I won't be afraid in the future." "All right, go call the butler over and have him dispose of the corpse. For the next few days, I will assign a few maids to you. Remember to take a few steps in front of people occasionally. Miss Biao, who came to the Luz 2 days ago, has never stepped out of this yard. Do you understand?" Nongqin nodded hard, as if she was trying to overcome the spreading fear in her heart. She thought the butler would panic when he saw the corpse, but she didn't expect him to be so calm. "His neck is twisted like this. How much strength did he use to hurt him?" The old butler guessed something from Nongqin's vague and mysterious description, so he came over with 2 confidants. With the light from the match, he saw the servant's completely twisted and sunken neck. He clicked his tongue. Nongqin was nervous. "Butler, this. Lang Jun heard a strange noise when he sent me here. I came over and saw this corpse. I don't know who did it. Someone suddenly died in the yard. What should we do?" The old butler snorted and waved his hand. The 2 confidants had already put the corpse into a black cloth bag. "We can't send him out secretly. Just throw him into the bucket of night incense, so that others won't see it and misunderstand." Asking people to move the corpse out secretly was the stupidest thing to do. It was no different from burying one's head. The people living near the Luz were not ordinary people. No matter which door the corpse was moved out, it was impossible to guarantee that no one would see it. The old butler was experienced. He put the body in the bucket of night incense and sent it out. Who would be so bored to check it? Nongqin was a little scared, but seeing the old butler so calm, she felt a strange admiration and envy. It was not the first time the system saw Jiang Pengji kill someone, but none of the previous scenes were as shocking as this one. She killed the bandits in the village quickly and neatly. Almost all of them died in an instant, but she strangled the servant to death with her own hands. Her strength was so great that she directly crushed the neck bone. The system held back for a long time and asked without confidence, "How could you kill such a weak ordinary person?" Jiang Pengji said coldly, "I killed him to show you." The system was speechless. "When did I ever tell you that I won't kill people who don't even have the strength to truss a chicken?" That servant was as weak as a chicken, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't have the ability to do evil. There were more than 20 people who died directly or indirectly in his hands. More importantly, if he is alive, it will have an uncontrollable impact on the ending. So it's better to nip the risk in the bud. The system asked her in a low voice, "Okay, I don't care about that. But, what do you mean by killing him to show me? I don't know what your previous host was like, but I know one thing. Don't treat me like a clay figurine. System, you have done more than one thing to disgust me. I hope there won't be another mission like today." The system was speechless. As I said, this kind of real-time mission is issued randomly and automatically. I can't control it. If you don't want to do it, just say no. Anyway, if you don't want to do the mission, how can I force you? Hearing the system's words, Jiang Pengji suddenly smiled. Her smile was full of inexplicable meaning. The system added, "But if you fail the mission, you will also have to bear the punishment. Don't blame me for not reminding you if you can't bear it." At that time, 2 hours had passed since Jiang Pengji refused to do the mission. Chapter 165. Jiang Pengji listened coldly to the system's countdown, but her mood was not affected at all. "Xuanmei, if you hear anything tonight, don't come in to investigate." Xiaofan sat outside the door, a neatly folded mattress beside her. The mattress was used by the maids to keep warm during the night. Xiaofan was surprised to hear Jiang Pengji's instructions, but she still agreed. Yes. Don't worry, Lang Jun. Okay. Jiang Pengji replied softly. The system was humane enough to give Jiang Pengji 3 minutes to prepare. Jiang Pengji unhurriedly took off her outer garment, leaving only her moon-white inner garment. She sat on the mattress and calmly waited for the system's punishment. 3, 2, 1. Punishment commencing. As the system's cold countdown ended, in that instant, a strange and explosive energy instantly enveloped his entire body. From the surface of his skin, it fiercely flowed throughout his body like a hot knife through butter. Every muscle in his body seemed to have been violently crushed by something. Jiang Pengji was forced to bend over from the pain. She lay on the mattress, making only a slight sound. As the explosive energy spread, her heart beat at an unimaginable speed, as if it was about to jump out of her throat. Her blood flowed faster, and hot sweat flowed out of her pores. In less than 2 or 3 breaths, the place where she was lying actually became damp. The sweat on her back and shoulder blades had already soaked her clothes, and the excess sweat slid down her skin and dripped onto the bed. To be honest, the system's punishment was not on the same level as Jiang Pengji's previous training. In terms of cruelty, the system's punishment was at the most ordinary level, while the Federation's training was at the hellish level. Comparing the two, Jiang Pengji would rather go through the Federation's training once more. She had been careless and overestimated herself. She had forgotten that this body belonged to an ancient woman. Without any specific training, the ancient woman's performance in all aspects could only be described as low, let alone compared to her previous self. Lu Lanting's body would collapse under the same pain, but Jiang Pengji's previous body would not be affected. Even though Lu Lanting's body had an additional 31 points of fusion force, it was only enough to upgrade the body from a weakling to a burly man. In the end, it was still a normal person. In terms of numbers, it was not even comparable to a genetic warrior. Under such circumstances, Jiang Pengji was faced with a very awkward situation. His spirit and will were strong enough, but his body had already reached the limit of collapse. Her face was slightly twisted because of the pain, but the corners of her lips curled up into a twisted and strange smile, with a hint of mockery. Although she didn't know how the system graded the pain of the electric shock, after experiencing it herself, she was very clear about one thing: the so-called level 5 electric shock just happened to be the limit of this body's endurance. If it was just a little bit heavier, the body would collapse first and die. From the start of the punishment, the system had entered a state of indifference as a bystander, coldly watching as she accepted the punishment, waiting for her to give in and beg for mercy. Wasn't it good for the system and the host to mutually benefit each other? Why was he so violent and uncooperative? Wasn't this harming the interests of both parties? As a system, it was very certain of Jiang Pengji's ability. If it ignored her bad temper, it could not find any fault with her. For a system, especially one that had a clear purpose to nurture, a stupid host was indeed easy to control, but it was also tiring to bring them along. Not only did he have to be a father and a mother, he had to calculate every step for them, just like a nanny or a wet nurse. Therefore, basically every system yearned to meet a host that was smart, motivated, and easy to control. However, Jiang Pengji did not fall into either category. She was smart and motivated, but her only fatal flaw was that she had a strong sense of self and would not allow herself to be controlled by others. A host that refused to follow the system's orders was more annoying than those who were too lazy to use their brains. At that moment, Lu Lanting's body was already on the verge of collapse. If not for Jiang Pengji's strong will, it would have been useless. She secretly told herself, "Hang in there, Jiang Pengji." The genetic warrior training method developed by the Federation essentially used external forces to stimulate the activity of muscle cells. Although this strange energy had caused her to suffer greatly, after she had endured it, the benefits would be huge. The system would not let her die. If she did, the system would suffer a great loss. However, not letting her die and not letting her suffer were two completely different concepts. She knew very well that the system was using this punishment as a warning. If she did not want to suffer anymore, she had to complete the system's mission obediently. That was unfortunate. Jiang Pengji was a tough bone that no one could bite. Who would dare to bite? Be careful, or you might break a mouthful of teeth. The system watched coldly from the side. It did not seem anxious at all. Lu Shi's body data was being monitored in real time. He was only at the 0 point. It was fine as long as he was still alive. 3 minutes was not a long time, but for Jiang Pengji, every second felt like a year. 1 minute ago, Lu Shi's body data was in a scary red color, which meant that his body was on high alert. 1 minute later, the system was still not anxious, but it did not notice that the red color of the data had faded. By the time it realized something was wrong, the color of the data had turned orange-red. It was still high risk, but the alert level was lower than the red. What had happened? The system was confused. In less than half a minute, the orange-red color slowly turned orange-yellow, and the alert level was lowered again. Before the system could figure out what had happened, the punishment that lasted for 3 minutes was over. Jiang Pengji lay on the bed with her limbs spread out. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She used her mouth and nose to greedily breathe in fresh air to relieve the pain in her body. 3 minutes have passed. Jiang Pengji's voice became extremely hoarse. It was as harsh as sandpaper rubbing against glass. The system softly responded. 3 minutes, it's really a pity it's too short, she laughed, and her voice sounded strange and cynical. The system thought that Jiang Pengji was mocking it, so it could not help but say, the real-time mission is issued automatically. I did not intentionally give it to the host. The time, frequency, and even the content of the mission are not within the system's control. The host's sarcasm will greatly affect the enthusiasm of the system, which will have a huge impact on our cooperation. Jiang Pengji was extremely tired, but there was a bright smile on her face. No, system, that's not what I meant. Jiang Pengji laughed so hard that she almost could not finish her sentence. Then what do you mean? The system asked. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.